You must stand up.
Now live streamed.
Oh, really? Did you say we're live now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Welcome to everybody online and in the room here today. We will start the day with a karakia, which we will remain seated for.
Pātaka ki tūru, Pātaka ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hia ake anga te atukura, he tio, he huka, he hau, tie, maunga.
Got it. Thanks, everybody. Apologies to those online for the lack of video footage. Unfortunately, our IT is playing up, which seems to be a theme over the weekend. Blue screen has now become a meme, I understand. But we do have, hopefully the microphone is working well, so you can hear what we're up to today. Welcome to the members of the public who are here today as well, and the board members and staff. Apologies today. We've got Tyrone has sent an apologies. He's had to be at a council meeting, and Howard has sent an apology as well. Okay, something else I need to do? Let's just roll straight into the information sessions. We've got.
Can we also say who's actually here, seeing as people can't
That's
see
a really
who's
good
here?
idea. Would you like to go around?
Oh,
you can start.
okay. So I'm here. I'm Gillian Frater. That's all I need to say.
Kathy Lumweb from the Littleton subdivision.
Constable Sam, across subdivision.
Lynn Leslie from Wairua.
Robert Harrison, Hickory Base.
Luana Sindels Mount Herbert.
Thank you, Tim. And we have staff here as well. We're all good at that. Yeah. But don't want to see. Right. Can we have the parts in-house maintenance mobilisation team, please? You folks would be so kind as to introduce yourselves.
Absolutely.
As well.
Thank you very much. Kia ora. Good morning, everyone. Al Hardy, I'm the manager of community parks, and we're here today to introduce a newly revamped in-house maintenance team that delivers the maintenance in the parks in your board area. Just a little bit of background, and then I'll try to be quiet and let other people introduce and reintroduce themselves. So about a year ago, council decided to bring all of the parks maintenance in-house through staff delivered teams. And over that seems very much like a blur now to all of us who've been busy trying to buy equipment and hire staff that want to do it our way. And really, I think one of the big drivers, and it was a provision in the council resolution, was that we have teams that are dedicated to board areas so that they are able to form a relationship not only with those spaces, but more importantly with the people. And you guys as the representatives of your constituencies. We've electrified a large amount of fleet, and we've had to purchase, and we're waiting on delivery even today of all of those new bits of kit that we're going to use to do the things that always have to be done in parks, which is mowing, line trimming, weeding, gardening, bringing those spaces back up to scratch. We've got a few people here today that are familiar faces because we've had a Banks Peninsula team for quite a while, and I think the success of that team and how Kerry's team's integrated with the community has been was one of the reasons why council brought this to the wider city. So I'll be quiet, let these guys introduce what they do. We are missing one person. I'll let Matt handle that. But then if you have any questions afterwards, let us know.
Hi, I'm Kerry Bowen. I'm the team leader for the Banks Peninsula maintenance team. I've been in this role for 5 years now, and we've been based in Devotionals, and this is Mario Rinaldo, and he's our supervisor for our Banks Peninsula team. from devotionals.
Take an interest.
He can.
Well, as Carrie said, I'm Mario. I'm the supervisor for the Banks Peninsula maintenance team, and we work primarily out of devotional, based on the other side.
Where do you live, Mario?
I live in LaBonte Bay for 2 weeks, and then to Otuti Valley for.
Could be a neighbour.
Moving around, yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Hi everyone, I'm Matthew Arrett and I'm the ops manager for this area. So I work alongside Kerry and another team leader called Pete, who looks after more of the coastal area. And we also was meant to have crew here today who's unfortunately ill, and he will be looking after the maintenance within Littleton and the surrounding areas over here as well. So that's very similar to what's happening, or the same as what's happening in Banks Peninsula, where there's a team just dedicated for this space and looking after all of the parks within, or community parks within Littleton.
Yeah, there's so much that we could say. We thought we'd let you guys, if you have questions, ask them, and then we won't bore you with all the details. But there's a lot going on in parks. It's been, and it's not just community parks. There's also the sports fields are coming over into in-house. So we used to split that. And the sporting codes have told us they really like what our team does, which had been delivered through that Metropolitan Sports or Hagley Oval team. So we're going to do those guys now have gone from a select number of sports fields to about 400 fields. Yeah. So it's yeah.
400 fields, right?
Yeah. The
Okay.
the whole of it, yeah. So the whole scale's gone crazy with those guys. Yeah.
So where's the, okay, sorry.
What, you go for it, Janine?
Where's the line between community parks and, do you call them, is it regional
parks?
Yeah.
Yeah. So regional parks looks after the Port Hills and then the coastal areas. And that's sprinkled all around even the peninsula. So areas where there's, let's say, very little improvements for recreation or passive amenity. Some people might call hiking, 20 Ks passive amenity, but I don't, obviously. So those spaces, larger, more contiguous stretches of land that we use for biodiversity and things of that nature generally have fallen under the regional parks approach, which is slightly different than community parks, but we're aligning a lot closer nowadays. Yeah.
Firstly, it's Nigel Harrison speaking.
Hi, Nigel.
This for the benefit of people.
Oh, great.
Well, I think it's fantastic, for Kerry and the team for being recognised as a benchmark to go forward and improve. Then we get some very favourable comments back with this. It seems to be sometimes a resource issue around them having been quite overloaded.
Absolutely. You want me to field that one? Yeah. So part of the council decision for in-housing was to also, when they made that decision, it was put for all the options basically were put forward. So going out for a new contract, all or in part, doing everything in house, etc. The financial side of that was that we were able to do some. So we're having a renewed resource. It's early days because we've run that off of a lot of estimates and assumptions, but I guess I can say that it doesn't look like we're going to have less resource doing it this way in the new world. Hopefully we'll have more. And by that, I mean, more people and more equipment should hopefully take some of that stress off the existing staff. Like you've got 2 more. So if we just look back 2 years to your team, we're adding 2 FTE? Two full-time people. Okay, so it's been a positive in that regard, and I hope that it'll even lift those spaces even better and allow these guys to do more and under less stress.
I've always been a fan for local jobs for local people, and it also fits in with our climate, I guess, focus with because we should get really incensed about the amount of city care vehicles travelling.
Yeah.
So there was any sort of feel around what sort of miles might come out of this, and because you got these guys living in the hills.
Yeah, so we had you guys have been over there for a while, and we've tried to let's say for over the hill, we've tried to hire as many local people so that traveling is reduced.
Yeah.
We workshopped how to do things citywide too, and it's come down to a east-west type depot. So as much as I'd like to have all the people in one big facility, it just didn't make sense to, even though we've bought big hybrid tractors, first in the country basically. Those big units still burn a lot of diesel, and so we've tried to, just from a cost and efficiency standpoint, split the city so that we can kind of work north-south through those east and west type depots. One of the depots is Pages Road, which these guys basically are based out of, and devotionals. And then we'll have another facility on the other side of town in the Napunawa area. We're leasing over there in Saltburn right now, just temporarily.
Right.
Yeah, just want to mention it was a good decision by council to bring in perhaps in-house. We have seen a lot of visibility after that, especially in the crowd, and we have seen good improvement, improved work done. I really like that your team is building a relationship, and I have seen that firsthand myself.
Good.
So really good job, and I think going forward, we will have more tourists, so in Nepal there's more people, a couple of more full-time staff will be really good so that it will take pressure off these guys. Really was very happy for you guys, and you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Just going back to my point about question about the regional community split, are there areas then which we have kind of, conflict, or overlaps and things? I'm assuming there must be some. I couldn't think.
Yeah, there's really no conflict. I mean, the manager there who recently passed away, Kay Holder, and I were, I thought we worked pretty effectively as colleagues over the last 10 years. So, and Kay was there a lot longer. The areas have, I guess, different functions, if you will, and so the people are, I think we're getting closer and closer. We had a planting day at Lancaster Park. We planted 8,500 new plants, and a big contingency of the regional park rangers were there working alongside us. So obviously, other than slightly different focus, they're still parks. They just look different.
It's like good connections between the
two
with the people.
They can do things slightly different sometimes because of this, just basically because of the spaces.
I have one question. You mentioned.
You don't get a question. You stay.
You mentioned a hybrid tractor.
Yes.
And you mentioned that you've electrified the fleet.
Yes.
Talk about the other
absolutely.
Vehicles that you've electrified.
Absolutely. Do you guys want to go?
Yeah, kick off. So,
somebody with excitement about it. I'm very excited about mowers, but I don't want to talk too long.
Mario doesn't have any electric mowers.
No, he doesn't. Yeah. So, none yet? Okay.
No.
All right. The nature of Mario's patch is such that they have limitations. Yeah. But we have got, so a lot of the sports fields, if you don't know, I'm going to jump in. They carry these really big mowers, basically, really heavy things, and they also have to go, across town. And John Deere was one of the first in the market to come up with and they're like 100 horsepower or more. And so they've come up with a hybrid. They don't have they have fully electric tractors, but they're kind of crawling along in the background. You know how when electric cars started, they weren't all that reliable, but now they're kind of more in the mainstream. Well, so we jumped at the opportunity to get a few of these tractors to pull some of this heavy gear. And then all of you'll see these big vans, the big white elephants, if you will. They seat 3, and when we do what we call a garden amenity round, we basically have them kitted out with electric line trimmers, hedgers, blowers, and the things that people need, secateurs and all the shovels and things to do gardening. And those 3 people will go to a garden in an electric van. I can't remember the brands, but
Ford Transit.
Yeah, Ford Transit's okay. Hard to miss because they're pretty big, but they're really cool. And we've got these mean green mowers, electric mowers that are ride on. You'll see the guys, they don't have a steering wheel. They have a couple of these. So yeah, it's a lot of
4 different brands overall of electric mowers. And the feedback has been good as well. All the staff are enjoying using them as well. And they last the whole day.
Yeah.
As well, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, we had trialed them in Hagley for a couple of years and found, ones that were reliable. So we even before we made a lot of the new plant acquisition this time, we trialed some even newer stuff. And, things like reliability and battery life and cost were all big drivers.
Another key aspect as well has been the feedback from people on the ground, that people in the parks, when they haven't got the blades running, you wouldn't even hear it.
Right.
But then as soon as the blades start running, yes, it is a bit noisy, so it's more enjoyable for people. And to add on to that as well, even a lot of our new equipment, say push mowers, line trimmers, we have some electric of those as well. So once again, they're just a hell of a lot more quiet. So if there's a family having a picnic in a park somewhere fairly nearby, it's not too disturbing for them.
Exciting. We've got time for maybe another couple of questions for Kathy.
Hi, Matt. Just curious to know how your experience has been in the Littleton area, in the park, sort of some impacts, plus and minuses, and what's going on really.
People over here are extremely passionate about their green spaces. That's one of the biggest things I've seen over the years. And from that, we tailor our approach to what people's needs are as well. So some parts, how often people want it mown, or the type of chemicals or no chemicals, and everything. So we tailor to that as well. It's when we receive that feedback, we take it on board and we adapt.
I think silently that's been one of the successes of Carrie's operation, because I'll do inspections with my lens, if you will, and I'll go, hey, when are you guys going to get to this space? And they know that that's less of a priority for that community. And it's great that we're able to, like you said, tailor the approach. I'm hoping that's going to grow across the city, because we'd rather people tell us how to do it for them than, get complaints on the phone. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know in Little River, our easy domain, there's lots of different uses for the domain. So you've got the rugby, and then it goes into the A&P show. And people don't want the clover on there for the horses, and so it's like there's a lot of tailoring and great communication. I know the community's really appreciated it. So the relationship building is one of the key strengths, I think, that keeping things in house and you guys as a team are doing. So I want to say thank you for that, and keep going, because it's good. It's good stuff.
It's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other burning questions? Anything else that you folks really want to tell us now? What can we do to help out more?
I've been saying this to all the boards. We haven't hired everyone yet, so we're still mobilizing. It's taken a while. Luckily, the weather has shut off growth in the parks, but it won't last forever. The daffodils are already coming up.
Yeah.
In the early days, while we get new staff in new places on new gear, they're not going to be as efficient as we hope they'll be ultimately. So just perhaps a little bit of just give us a little bit of scope in the early days, but keep the communication. Yeah, that doesn't mean don't communicate. Yeah.
It's just a matter of letting our networks, as we discussed, things around saying that you guys are still, getting your foundation sorted for being in-house.
Yeah.
That's really easy for us to communicate to our people, and that sets the expectation too. But we will continue the communication.
Excellent.
Community we are, don't we?
Yes.
You get some good feedback from people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, everything looks really good, well maintained, well kept.
And thank you on behalf of the board for the support you provide for the reserve committees.
Yes,
the board's reserve committees.
Mm.
Because they can be, they can suck some time. But you've been establishing relationships and, getting along and working out what you need to do in that space. So that's really, really helpful.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate you coming here.
It's good seeing you.
Yeah.
All right.
Never handled. He's trying to do it for 5 years.
We've got Paul here coming to talk about stormwater management for the whole of Banks Peninsula. Hi, Paul.
Thank you for inviting me to talk to you about stormwater management plans. I'd hope to bring a few more of the team, but they had other things they needed to do today. So I'm going to run through what a stormwater management plan is, the things it covers, and how we're approaching stormwater management plans, and talk to you about consultations, because I do need to consult with. In fact, I need to consult with the board among other people. A stormwater management plan is one of the things that we're required to do under our comprehensive stormwater discharge consent. And the purpose of a plan is to limit the adverse effects of stormwater discharges on surface and groundwater quality and quantity. The consent requires a stormwater management plan to be developed, but it's not the only thing that achieves the purpose. Under the consent conditions, the council also has to do water quality and ecological and tangata whenua monitoring. It inspects and audits industrial sites, because industrial sites are typically some of the potentially more contaminating areas in the city, and they're out of sight unless we go and have a look at them, which we do, and we talk to site owners about best practice stormwater management. The council puts controls around erosion and sediment control during construction, and we have an education and engagement advisor or coordinator who engages with schools and water interest groups and water care partners. However, stormwater management plans, that's a great colour, is it? Stormwater management plans are perhaps the biggest thing for the council. So stormwater management plans are constrained by conditions in the consent. The conditions say what has to go into a stormwater management plan. And at the heart of a stormwater management plan is that for a catchment we set targets to reduce urban contaminants towards set standards. What you can't see here is it says a stormwater management plan. Oh, thanks. It plans measures to achieve the targets, and within the city, it might set it sets river flooding targets, although that's not such an issue in Banks Peninsula. So a stormwater management plan is determined by consent conditions, but it's also constrained by the long-term plan, because a long-term plan has to be consulted on. A long-term plan is already in place by the time a stormwater management plan is developed. So a stormwater management plan is funded by something that's already in place. So there's a constraint there by the long-term plan on what a stormwater management plan can achieve. Some stormwater issues are dealt with outside of stormwater management plans, such as operations and maintenance.
It's not working either.
While we're waiting for the next slide to come up, it's a slide that shows the location of I'm sure you're extremely familiar with the settlements in the peninsula. This slide is to say that the stormwater management plan, it's a plan for settlements of Pātaka or Rākaihautū, the peninsula. So it doesn't apply to the whole. It doesn't apply to the whole peninsula. Rural areas are excluded. Rural roads are also not within the scope of the SMP. I think there are 27 settlements represented there. Some, as you know, are pretty small. Some have small or sparse or no stormwater networks. And their stormwater is quite likely, some of them, their stormwater is getting treated informally in swales and by soakage into the ground. Next, please. So, a stormwater management plan is dealing with stormwater management plans from settlements that have a stormwater network and from settlements that are big enough to impact receiving water. So we do expect there are some settlements where stormwater won't be treated. The consent doesn't require flood mitigation for these settlements as it does for city catchments. And the reason for that is that flooding that affects settlements on Banks Peninsula has rural origins, and rural water is not stormwater under the as it's defined by the consent. It defines stormwater as rainwater that runs off developed land. Yeah. Obviously, the elected council has the discretion to address flooding, and the team's aware from having spoken to the board a couple of times previously that flooding can be quite an issue for some settlements. So I'll deal with that. In 2 or 3 slides' time. What I was going to say here is that the council does have discretion to address flooding, and the team's expectation is that it's more likely to want to address individual flooding issues individually and outside the stormwater management plan. Let's see if I can. The approach we're taking to stormwater management plans is to, well, we identify the existing state of the environment. We do that for all SMPs. We have Pātaka partners carrying out an ecological survey and some wet weather water quality monitoring in the 2 harbours. We need to understand the goals and concerns of the community. We expect that we'll be focusing on the larger settlements, and that the expectation is that might mean Littleton, Governors Bay, Diamond Harbour, Akaroa, and perhaps Little River. We expect that we're more likely to target sediment than heavy metals catchments, as we have in Christchurch. The reason being that sediment is the issue that continues to be brought up in respect of harbour water quality. And we expect to be looking at treatment options that are suitable for small spaces. The reason for this is that settlements are, well, they're small, they're compact, they're quite close to the coast, and they're mostly hilly. And that sort of environment is just not suitable for introducing detention and treatment basins that we use, that are our go-to for catchments within the city. So detention and treatment basins are dual purpose, they're pretty good effect, but if we can't use them, we are looking at having to use other means. And the other means are what we think we're more likely to consider mitigation methods such as filters. I've got some photographs that I'll jump in and out of. I hope jumping in and out of. So I'll just have photographs of examples. A cartridge filter, such as this one. This is actually quite a large one, and we might be likely to use something more compact, but what it shows is a filtered cartridge, which is removable for maintenance in a chamber underground. They are pretty good for removing both sediment and metals, dissolved metals. A biofilter is probably the best. It's a relatively new development. Probably does the best treatment of just about anything. And it looks like a compact one might look like that. An organic medium, quite carbon rich, that is quite free draining, and it takes out both sediment and metals really well. And Patchwork filter, very compact, doesn't do such a good job of contaminant removal, but it's an insert that goes into stormwater catch pits. Other potential means of contaminant removal we're considering are street sweeping, although that only picks up larger particles. Roof painting, so that would be the painting of roofs that are in poor condition and are discharging a lot of zinc, and some means of disseminating low copper brake pads. And I mentioned copper because copper has been picked up in 3 streams on the peninsula in monitoring. 2 streams in Akaroa and 1 in Governor's Bay. So, flooding. What is happening in respect to flooding is that we've been compiling information about known flooding, and there's quite a bit's known. So there's historical information about Akaroa Harbour, Akaroa Basin. There have been recent flooding incidents, Little River, Lebons Bay, and going back a few more years, Littleton. And we've been carrying out interviews or surveys with residents in the northern bays, particularly after the floods, in respect to the floods that occurred in 2021.
You mean Eastern Bays?
Yes, you could be right.
Yeah.
Okay. So the stormwater management plan will compile the information we know about. It'll try and compile a risk summary for each settlement. And then, now, I have to come and talk to the board about this, about the approach that you think is going to be the most useful. I think there'd be two ways to go. One is that the risk summary is presented and can be referred to in future LTP applications. The other is that the risk summary is presented and, along with a recommendation to the council, that it set up an investigation into flooding matters on the peninsula. Either way, it'll be up to the elected council how it deals with that, but there might be a smart way to present the information, and the board might be, or the board and the servicing staff might, people I'd like to talk to about that.
Yeah.
Consultation. First, I should say, first of all, that the consent condition requires us to develop an SMP in consultation with the community board, actually, and with the zoning committee, and with 1 or 2 other parties. So we are going to have to consult with you, and happy to. We're being guided in that by the comms and engagement team, and by the service centre staff. We're also happy to consult with residents and community groups, although we're aware that they've been consulted with before. So we want to do this in a way that doesn't annoy them. And we also have to do it in a way that can contain expectations, because the SNP is not going to be able to do everything the community might want. I'm myself engaging with Mahanui Kurata about consultation with Rūnanga. And I'm waiting to hear back from them about that. Now that's all I have to say, because I'm expecting that you probably have questions that might be more informative than the things I can put up. So yeah, I'm just going to be here to answer questions.
Thank you. Appreciate that. There's some really meaty stuff I'm sure we're very keen to get into there. Who wants to go first?
So you might want to go first, then you've got to do it.
With that little river, you mean? Yes, yeah. And we've got a good flooding mitigation group working together on that. And it's interesting to note that rural water is not stormwater. That actually is quite enlightening for me. I guess the risk summary process is going to help how everything can work from here on in. When is that part of this consultation process? Like what is the process from here to get the stormwater management plan finalised?
We're expecting to deliver the stormwater management plan to the environment category about the middle of next year, let's say June 2025. We need to have a draft version by about February to go out to consultation maybe by March, to go out to consultation in April, May, probably March, April. So yeah, so we expect to have a draft, let's say early in the new year. We're actually finding this the most difficult of the stormwater management plans because we don't have our normal option of planning for basins and wetlands. And the options that we have available to us, the ones I put up there, filters and the like, are actually pretty difficult to implement. So I'm just complaining here. It's a little difficult. We're lagging a bit in our planning.
Yeah.
But by the end of the year, we should have a pretty complete draft. As to what the flooding risk summary looks like, it's in reasonably good shape now. I could, when we come to consult with you, which I expect to be before the end of the year, more or less as soon as it can be organised between the engagement team and service centre, I could let you have the summary as it looks now. So it's just information that many of you might know, or some of you know some of it,
yes.
But it's put it all in one place.
So with my community board chair hat on, we went to the LTP process, talking a lot about protecting our environment, especially from global climate change, and that affects certain areas in different ways. Flooding was a big part of that. So as far as working with what's already there, I hope that we have supported whatever you need to do as a team from what we can do here as much as we can, because it is about, it is frustrating, but it is about those 27 settlements, and you mentioned maybe 6 who have specific focus there.
For contaminant generation.
Oh, contaminant, okay.
Yeah. There are probably different settlements where they're affected by flooding.
Okay. Right, I've got questions around flooding. So what are the areas that are focused on in the flooding?
Well, the way I would say it, there are settlements where we know there has been flooding. So the Bonds Bay, Akaroa does probably once every 20 years. Akaroa has water, a lot of water flowing through the town. Little River's probably the standout example. Littleton can have issues.
Little like a Lowood, they talk about the stream and washing the road out. Does that count as flooding?
Okay, I think any issue can be raised. It then comes down to how the council perceives it and deals with it. I can imagine one of the difficulties. Well, there's perhaps two difficulties for the council. So one of them is probably the hard things is when houses get flooded as opposed to when the land gets flooded. So there's an issue is what flooding we're talking about. The second issue is if the council deals with, let's see, alleviates flooding for houses, probably within the thought process of the council is what do we do when sea level rise occurs and there's a whole bunch of houses that's become flooding from sea level rise? Have we committed ourselves to dealing with every house that's potentially floodable? So there's a layer of planning and consideration there that I probably don't get to participate in. I just get to provide the information for the council to look at. I think what I can do is provide the best information I can to be taken back to the council at a later date by others, such as yourselves, in respect of individual issues.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. I'll start with the wetland. You mentioned different filters. They would be ideal in a city, and especially where there is a sewerage system, stormwater management system already installed. Wetlands in rural settings like next Peninsula, they provide a natural filter system, and they mitigate flooding itself and then help in charging aquifers. So is there any plan to use the historical areas which were wetland and they were converted into farmland or some other type of land development was done there? And how does this scope of work that you are working at the moment to achieve in terms of wetland there?
I think the issue with existing or historical wetlands is that I think in most cases they're somewhat remote from the sediment. So the two issues, one is to get stormwater to them. We'd have to take it quite a long distance, perhaps across streams. It doesn't seem very practicable. And the other issue is that wetlands in rural, outside the settlements are being fed by rural water that the council doesn't have to deal with, and it's realistic. It's not going to deal with stuff it doesn't have to deal with because it's a cost. So let's take Little River as an example. It's really quite a sparse. It's really quite a sparse settlement. So down towards the railway station, the old railway station, in the area where it gets flooded, there are 6 houses and 5 businesses. They don't generate a lot of stormwater. They do generate some contaminants. Actually, the major amount of contaminants are generated by the state highway, who's someone else, and we have to figure out whether is the council going to treat the state highways stormwater, or are we going to lean on them and try and ask them to treat their own, which they'll probably decline to do. Further up the valley, there are a lot of houses that probably discharge their stormwater onto the ground where it soaks in and gets treated.
Or traditional dumps, historic dump sites.
Do you say dump sites?
Dump sites, yeah.
Maybe I'm not aware of them.
Yeah, there are more on the peninsula, and we have got a typical example that the council has been, from Chakapuniki, there was an historic dump site in the Vons Fair, and a few other places that dump was transported out of the base, and there could be a potential.
I'll thank you. I'll check those out.
Yeah. Thank you for wetland. I think in some rural settings that I know, wetlands could be very helpful. For example, you mentioned the Vons Fair. There's a decent wetland there, historic by the flat, past the first bridge, the old school. So a few other examples that I can give you. In terms of flooding, when a flood happens in rural setting, the first people who are affected are the local communities and residents, especially on the Banks Peninsula, with roads being vulnerable, and we have got a good example in the past. So, would it be wise to consider consulting communities in developing this scope of work that you are doing at the moment? Not just yourself or us, consult as community, where we can give you feedback to some extent, but the real people, the information that you are after and how people are affected would be the residents.
Yeah.
So we could come up with a plan, you could come up with a plan that that the expectations are not as much people in the rural community, especially on the peninsula, that I'm aware. People know that council can't do everything, to protect them. But it would be a good idea to raise that issue now, so that you could incorporate that in the plan, so that you have something to fall back on if we get some negative feedback from the community.
It's a very difficult issue, isn't it? Because I'd be extremely happy to go out and talk to communities if I knew there was a fund to deal with flooding. I'm willing to talk to anybody who wants to talk, or the team is willing to talk to anybody who wants to talk to us. When we particularly want to get good information about which houses are floodable, because we think the SCP should have good information in it. We need to talk to people though, a bit without giving them the expectation that the council will solve the problem, because the likelihood is that it might not. So it's just a difficult one to navigate.
Oh, are we going to? Sorry, we've got Kathy, Luana, Nigel, and then you. Yeah. And then Julia.
So just really quickly on your the plan, I've just noted the ecological, the sediment and the filters. Are you doing any case studies around the filters in some of the settlements, or and because sediment is definitely very visible?
We might monitor filters once they're installed, but we're relying on information we get from manufacturers and from international research at the moment.
Yeah. So I'm from Casbay, so basically every time there's a rain dump, you can see like the beach is brown for days, and sediment and they kind of fall into the rural and the suburban. So in terms of the building on the slopes there, so do we fall under the stormwater of building? Yeah. So how does that kind of get taken into consideration?
Well, Casbay sediment comes within the scope of the plan, but the sediment you see on the beach and in the harbour properly comes from the hillside outside the sediment. And first, the council's not required to deal with that sediment. In fact, it probably can't. We don't know of a way to mitigate the sediments that's coming from thousands of hectares of Fort Hills.
Right.
And we might not even try to capture it as it comes through the sediment, because it would just fill and clog the filter in minutes probably. So we will most likely try to deal with urban water runoff only.
And just really quickly, in terms of ecological, one good thing, it's great that you're doing that, because we have 2 fish ladders in Casbay, and it's been working really well. Yeah. So that's really cool.
Right.
Thank you.
No,
Thank you. I have so many questions. I won't have time to ask them today, and also Tyrone has some questions. Is it possible for there to be some follow-up in terms of questions
You could
for
ring
you
me.
after this? Okay, perfect. I was really surprised as well. Rural land zeros excluded from the SMP. So we don't have a map of areas here, do we, that can show actually what those rural areas are? Because I'm curious about a lot of Pūranga presumably would be zoned as rural. I know Rākaihautū is considered rural.
Well, I think of Rākaihautū as a settlement, but there's quite a lot of Pātaka land that is effectively rural.
Yeah, so there's quite complex, I suppose. And thinking about the contaminants that you have and the issues that we've had with not being able to swim in our beaches, and also a lot of farmlands would also be zoned as rural. Would that be true?
All farmland.
Yeah, so that would seem to be quite a major issue for contaminants that are going to our waterways if they're not being monitored.
I think, well, it's not been monitored by this council, they've been monitored by EP. But they're not being, those rural contaminants aren't being mitigated.
oh, sorry.
No,
Maybe one more, and then we'll go to
okay.
no.
Yeah,
And we'll bounce
and
back
it's-
around.
it's
We've got a bit
sometimes
of time
it's
yet. We've got
yeah.
till 5 past, so.
Yeah, and I suppose that speaks to a lot of the issues that we're having with our waterways, not being able to use them. What can we do? I mean, it's a major issue. It doesn't seem like it's going to be an issue that's going to be, foreseeable future. It looks pretty dire.
Is this sort of, I'm sort of in your
Yeah.
patch in my head. I'm sitting here quietly because it's all about the scope, and I guess we're concentrating our efforts. There's also this huge area that we're responsible for. It's not being addressed. It's almost like undies, togs things. Like the water's coming down through there, going through the town, okay, we'll deal with it there. It goes down through here and washes away a whole lot of stuff, then we won't deal with it. It sort of has that sort of feel to it. And I'm not, I'm just putting it out there as a representative for the Peninsula, that this is not really going to address a lot of the things that we're having to work with. I'm sure some of that consultation will possibly pull that out. And I know this is a journey we're on, as is a plan, it's a plan. So maybe we can get more feedback as we go, because I know this one's dear to our hearts. So,
Over 150 years, the peninsula's been deforested, and it's unstable land. It's bleeding loose into harvest, and we've developed and live in these cities where until 2009, when there was the Land and Water Regional Plan had some water quality rules, we just regarded the environment as a place to dump our waste, and anything that ran off an impervious surface in the city, ran into the rivers, and that was zinc off our roofs and copper off brake pads and zinc off tyres and hydrocarbon, oil and grease and litter, and to think in terms of a fix, I just it's not something that's going to happen. I think we have to think in terms of a direction of travelling, and how and then it's how many generations before we see measurable results. So the council, funded by its ratepayers, isn't able to think about a fix.
No, that's what this is taking me. And where do we need to go?
Is it in regards to, this is a question, is it in regards to our communities having relationships with the council, with ECAM, with Runanga, like we're doing in Little River, and using that as kind of like the leverage that we need to get stuff done?
Well, you look at what's happened up north. This whole town's washed away. Obviously, probably a rural city, suddenly becoming a housing settlement, then back to rural, because there's no houses there that were washed away. It's like a macro approach that needs to be formulated. So
Well, you do
And
need
it's
to,
not that
we need to eat the elephant, and whatever we can do
Yes, right.
here, we need to focus on what we can do as a community board. So, okay.
Sorry, can I just ask one more question? In the Pātaka itself, we don't have drains. Once every year or so, the council comes along, digs out a channel, and all the water runs off down to the sea. A lot of that water runs onto people's properties. Given that it is within a rural zone, what does that engagement look like with Rūmanga in terms of being able to mitigate that or being able to improve those channels as opposed to, so we don't have so much sediment because everything runs through dirt, essentially.
We'd be happy to talk to your about that. It's being dealt with in council terms. It's being dealt with by our maintenance team in normal operations at the moment. But you're indicating that it's not working very well.
Well, we don't have any kind of concrete channels. It just runs off the road straight into people's properties at our pension flats. Runoff from water from the road has always been an issue. It's caused rotting of the retaining walls. I've made numerous inquiries about it, but nothing's done. So it seems like the answer is always just digging dirt channels.
Okay, perhaps that sounds like a special issue that we should capture specially. So, should I ring? Do you think I should ring Andrew about having a discussion?
It would be good to set that to the room in terms of how we can have the council that can be done. And I imagine that's going to be happening more other than
I'm in MKT's hands about that, but yes, in principle, yes.
So, Lorana, do you want to work with staff in regards to working through that? Yeah, great. Sorry, Nigel. Gillian's been waiting patiently. We will get around to you.
Thanks, Lynn. Well, I guess my issue is coming back, and thanks for all the information you've given us, Paul. It's very interesting and useful. And my issue probably is already being raised too. So I was kind of surprised when you said, I mean, I know that sediment's a big issue, say in the harbour here, but if you asked anybody locally, they wouldn't be thinking, oh, that's the main issue at the moment. The main issues for the last couple of years has been with water quality in the harbour. Has been to do with, well, as my understanding is a fecal contamination, and therefore it affects them directly because they can't or don't feel safe swimming in the harbour. But yeah, so where does that come? Is that part of the stormwater management plan, and how important is it? And I'm also aware that ECAN is also responsible for some of it, but it sounds like a lot of that fecal contamination maybe comes from streets rather than farmland, but I don't know because I'm not an expert on that.
Well, I guess it was more likely to come from farmland, but perhaps you're right about that. We don't have targets to deal with bacteria, with pathogens.
Okay.
And so we haven't done so. I think we wouldn't know how to. Other than that, control, the requirement for people to pick up their dog poop is I guess, is one council initiative to get pathogens off the streets. But the biggest source of pathogens in Christchurch, we believe, are waterfowl. When fecal source tracking is done, so they can, using DNA to figure out where it comes from. It's geese and ducks. Probably not the same in settlements, but it's just this sort of not street sourced in the city. But perhaps I can follow that up with ECAN. See what they know.
Nigel, and then ask if you have some more.
Yeah, with this conversation can go on for years. I think just talking about the Rūnanga, the Rūnangas tend to be in low-lying parts of the catchment and somewhat generally dominant. I've seen a photograph of the 1950s before they brought the current variety the way it is at Anuku, and the whole valley had been washed out of nothing but rocks. That was in a storm environment. So it just gets very confusing for me as to, if we're going to be talking about a community such as the Ruku is right down on the beach with this potential of being wiped out completely, how that really interacts with the community versus the ECAN responsibility. And as a ECAN responsibility, I think we need to have a conversation with ECAN. We need to go wider and really go from there. Just what I'm feeling. Thank you, Paul. You're doing a great job.
There's new information to me, but I'll be interested to follow it up.
Yes, so just one small comment and a question. You may want to include Eastern base, but you may want quite a lot of communities that would like to contribute to that, and hopefully that information will be useful for you in mitigating stormwater in rural settings, which are not covered by this scope of work. So what do we expect at the end of this journey when you develop the plan scope of work? What do we expect? What will change? And how would we deliver stormwater management better?
In respect of contaminants, we'll select a number of settlements, they'll probably be the larger ones, where we'll set a target. We'll try and capture a certain amount of contaminants, reduce the annual load by a set amount. In respect of flooding, I think the stormwater management plan will have to make it as clear as possible what damage is occurring or what is the risk to homeowners, and put that to the council in a way they can understand and hope. I don't think the SMP will generate immediate activity on flooding. I think there will have to be some other secondary trigger, like an approach by this board, or either to the SMP or to the council, to ask them to develop an investigation program. The way almost anything, you probably know better than I do, but the way I see things happen in the council is there's a problem, it's brought to the council, and they create a program that's funded. And there isn't such a program for flooding. Not anywhere actually. In Christchurch or BP, but it's needed.
Okay. So you're only dealing with if the flooding is affecting the landowners, if it is affecting the biodiversity.
Well, I think what I'm saying is that flooding affecting houses, seems to me the most important thing. And there's a really good argument for dealing with it on a compassionate basis.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
So just really quickly, so in terms of stormwater and whatever with climate change and the intensity of things to come, and just to lead on from what Gillian said, is the mixing of stormwater and wastewater. I think there has been issues with contamination around the harbour, and then with your long-term plan, based on your funding, how do you sort of encapsulate all that stuff that's happening and going to happen with greater intensity?
I thought that there were fewer issues now that wastewater has been dealt with for the settlements around the harbour. I didn't, and there've been, the council has either dealt with or is dealing with infiltration into, wrong connections. So I wasn't aware of wastewater getting into the stormwater system, not as a significant issue.
Because they're doing a study at the moment where they're looking at where your contaminants are coming from. And I think that's a city council study. So I just wanted to also know if you're connected into that study, because I think around Corsia Bay, I think it has been fixed, but whether it's still happening is the old pipes and stuff and roots and things like that still sort of needing to get maintained, and whether the maintenance programs with money in the long-term plan can still take priority.
I'll have to go and talk to the wastewater team because I've not heard about the issue.
Right. So interesting.
Because you know it's a big issue in Akaraka that stormwater's getting into the wastewater.
Yes.
And these toxic again.
Yeah.
So it's getting into stormwater's getting into wastewater's getting into stormwater. I don't think it can go one way, just one way. Because of damaged infrastructure.
Is that true?
It's just something that's
Yes.
the conversation.
They might both be occurring, but I think they're separate issues. So if a private wastewater pipe's cracked, then when there's water sitting in the ground, it'll seep into the wastewater pipe, or sometimes there might be a downpipe must be. Yes.
Well, we've been told by Kylie that if we fix all the downpipes in Akaraka, we wouldn't have a problem with the stormwater getting into the wastewater.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to relate that to where that's going with the stormwater, because the stormwater and wastewater are intrinsically sort of connected in some way.
In Christchurch, anyway, when there's a lot of infiltration of the wastewater network, when it's raining, the wastewater network surcharges, so the waste bubbles out of a manhole or a vent onto the street and usually into a stream river. So that's an issue that could be happening. Wastewater's not my field, but it could be happening in Ngākaro, and perhaps quite likely it is when there's a lot of rain. I've talked to Kylie.
It's a big issue in Ngākaro with the new stormwater system going in there and wastewater system. Yes. I'm just looking around the room. I know we're getting close to our time. I just want to make sure that everybody's asked the questions.
I think there'll be more report backs, which I'm sure will bring up many more questions. Yes.
So Lana looks like she's going to.
Oh, look, Tara had quite a few questions around what's been done to mitigate things, slips, ongoing pollution into waterways, high levels of service on maintenance like guys cover. There's a whole lot of questions, and maybe it's better that
if we have that email so that we can always then refer to it. So definitely working with staff on that. But from our point of view, and what I'm hearing around the group is this is a great start, and it's all about working with those different groups, including your team as well, to get the best outcome for our communities that we can. And having that long-term view is really, really important as well. I would love to investigate more the ideas of it just affecting households being one of the main, criteria for that is where we need to work on the area. My query around that obviously is we have many places on the peninsula where the access is via one road, and if that road is flooded, then that causes more than just that particular household to be affected. It causes everybody who can't then move to and from to be affected. So I would love to investigate the potential of maybe just having more criteria than just households being of compassionate grounds to consider whether that's an area to work on. And I want to be able to, push for a fund for flooding. Whatever we can do from the community board, from our point of view, that seems to be a really important thing that we can focus on to maybe be a squeaky wheel at the council, do whatever we can for that. So thank you so much for coming in today and answering all of our very pointed questions, and they're so important to our community. So we really, really appreciate your time and that you've made to come here and talk to us. It's really, really important. Thank you so much. We will talk again, no doubt. Thanks. Great. Right, so we've got Bridget coming to talk to us about hybris reporting. Have we got Bridget here? No Bridget yet. Who do we have over there?
Hi, I'm Ashley.
Hi, Ashley.
Oh, great.
Hey, Grant. Oh, fantastic. Oh, thanks for coming in. Yes, we'll do that. Linda, should we just go straight to the good to go? Yes, cool.
Okay.
All right, Ashley, come on up. We're still live.
I think I wrapped it.
Yes, fantastic.
Which is not brilliant.
Yeah, so Ashley is here from Good to Go, ways to get to school.
Thanks for popping in early, that worked out well.
I used to walk.
Good, that's all right.
Both ways.
Really go to.
Cool, and does this clicker just work? Yeah.
Yes.
Shall we introduce ourselves?
Yeah,
Would
there
that
we
be
go.
helpful?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll start with you one.
Can I know one of them?
Gordon Harrison from Acro Base.
Kia ora, Penelope Goldstein, Community Governance Manager.
I'm Lynn, representing Wairewa.
Ask Sam, representing Acro Base.
Kathy Lumweb, Littleton Subdivision.
And I'm, we know, we know it's a
And I'm Linda Burks, Governance Advisor.
Cool, perfect. Cool. And then kia ora, I'm Ashley. I'm the Community Travel Advisor, predominantly for schools and our travel demand management team at council. So one thing I will point out before we get started is this PowerPoint is very general, but I do have kind of your guys' schools kind of printed out in front of me, and I can answer questions about your schools kind of more specifically. I just didn't want to have to make kind of so specific points, and more specifically, sometimes we get to other community boards. You know, there's quite a few schools start cropping up, so kind of look at making things more efficient for timers. And we also have 145 schools in Christchurch. So as you can imagine, things are always kind of hectic, but it has been the last 2 weeks while they've all been on holidays. So kind of kick it off. So the cost for schools to kind of engage with us and do our kind of programs and things like that is free. So there kind of isn't a cost hindrance to be able to work with us, as I know it is sometimes a big barrier for schools to be able to kind of engage in different programs. So we definitely don't work alone or in isolation. So these are kind of a wee bit of a snapshot of who we work with. So we work alongside police. So I'm actually meeting with police, all of our school community officers after this. And then we work alongside Sport Canterbury, Ministry of Education, also our neighbouring councils and things like that. Yeah, so pretty much everyone. We don't like to reinvent the wheel. We kind of like to make sure that we're all sharing resources and things like that. We also know that what we do isn't kind of just about transport. So obviously when we're kind of getting out there, being active and things like that, there's kind of a whole whirlwind of things that can come with that. And you guys are quite lucky. You guys don't just get green kind of infrastructure exposure. You guys get nice blue infrastructure exposure out here. So you can kind of get those kind of added benefits of kind of walking and things like that to school too. So what we offer schools, so I'll kind of go through this, but this is a nice picture. And there'll be things that you might see in there that you notice. So yeah, it's some kind of things like cycle safe, different school infrastructure, walking school buses, parking signs, which aren't always as relevant out here, but walk to school week, which most of your schools participate in, and things like that. So the Good to Go Ways to Get to School program was kind of created as a way to, so we've always had, have you guys heard of school travel plans? Possibly before? Maybe. I'll talk about them later, but pretty much a lot of schools kind of seen them as a lot of effort to kind of engage with them from both their side and our side. And so we kind of looked to create a program that kind of still created that engagement, but actually kind of created a process that was more about ongoing engagement, and we kind of are able to check in them a lot more regularly. As council, we kind of still get the ticky things that we kind of like to get. So the, I'll talk about it later, but I'll talk about it now and we'll skip over it later. Kind of the survey data. So we have an annual survey now that kind of helps us establish how people are moving around kind of Christchurch. And then we also have Walk Away to School Week, and we ask them to jump on board for that. And that is our kind of active travel campaign that they can do. So for some of the schools, especially out this way, like it can be a little bit more tricky because they're traveling a lot further. So for example, like Acro Area School, they'll encourage a bit of more like a have a go. So you might just bring your scooter in the car and skirt the rest of the way, the 2 blocks, mum will drop you off. And it just takes some of that congestion off the school gate and kind of opens parents' eyes that, oh, I don't have to drop them right to the door, and kind of just encourages it a little bit more. Really big advocates for it normally, but they didn't participate this year, is O'Kane's Bay. which I absolutely love them because they're obviously a really small school. But they normally always jump on board to kind of participate, but I think they had some other stuff on this year. So it's kind of, we kind of get to do that tick box of getting that encouragement and having a go and it being a safe, fun environment for all, kind of ticked off. So that's our things we normally put in a school travel plan anyway. And then the school kind of gets that ongoing engagement with us. I said it. And then for our high school, so I guess you guys have got Akaroa Area School as a kind of a high school as well. But they participate in Crash Bash as well, which I'll talk about later on. And they also receive our newsletters. So we send out a newsletter every single term to kind of be like, hey, this is what's coming up, or a reminder of what's coming up this term, but also what's coming up next term that you might want to participate in. Here are some workshops we can come do at your school. Here's maybe what some other schools have been up to. Just kind of some general, we keep it short and sweet. If there isn't stuff to put in it, we don't like to bombard them. So for our registered schools on the program, so pretty much to sign up, they just fill out a form online and that's it. They kind of get an extended amount of support, I guess. So we'll obviously always support all of our schools in Christchurch, but if they're looking for walking school bus workshops, additional walk-a-wood school weeks, anything like that, we kind of can help them out with. We can engage them in school travel plans if they want to do them. So if you don't know what a school travel plan is, it's pretty much just a holistic way of kind of looking at all the issues that are going on in the area. So whether or not it be more kind of social things, if it's infrastructure, kind of, you know, what is going on, because sometimes, you know, it can be quite easy that it's something small that's going on, but sometimes it's, you know, it's a number of things and we can get sometimes quite concentrated on right outside the school gate, but actually it might be something that's happening, you know, 10 blocks away that actually is causing the issue for those kids to be able to kind of come in by those active modes. So that kind of helps us kind of take a step back. Our annual school travel survey, we launched it last year. This year was our second year. But yeah, I talked about it before. And you can put the slides in all the time if you need some. Another thing we've started this year is our scooter skills program. So we contract this out to Primary School Canterbury, and they run this for us. So any school who's on the program is kind of able to register for this. We do have limited spots though, but it kind of creates a wee bit of a carrot for kind of jumping on board. So, and it also kind of suits some of our schools where biking might not be as more suitable. So for example, Diamond Harbour School and Littleton both had it this year. So they both jumped on board because some of their kids kind of more choose to scoot than they do to biking. And so this is run for year 3s as well. And it's just kind of about kind of not charging down on your scooter and running into people, being a bit more cautious out there. We also have, so any school that signed up can also participate, will book in class workshops. So we're very lucky that we have 2 travel planning assistants in our team who are contracted part-time to kind of work directly with our schools who are on the program and deliver these workshops. So they deliver, so there's an Exploring Active Transport Junior and Senior. So that kind of looks at what is active transport for our juniors, and they focus a little bit on the stop, look, listen, on school site. So which is kind of what police cover a wee bit, but police are finding they don't have the time to be able to get everywhere to cover it. So we're kind of helping to fill a wee bit of a gap along the way. And then the senior kind of looks at different road users, who's out there, and also starting to explore what kind of infrastructure is out on the street that either supports us or, you know, if it's speeding cars, or well, how, you know, how do we slow down speeding cars? Or it might be different speed limits and things like that, or speed humps. And then we've got a Safer Speeds workshop. So this was kind of developed off the back of the Wakakrutaki one that they produced. And that is all about kind of learning about how when cars are traveling faster, it takes them longer to stop pretty much, which has been quite good. Kids are kind of like, oh, so this means if I'm out, you know, on a busy rural road, I can't just walk out. And they're like, no, and things like that. So, and looking out for crossings, that's why it's good to look out for crossings and stuff like that. And we've got a how to catch the bus. So this is kind of, it's got senior year 5 to 8, but pretty much how we market it to schools is if you've got kids that are likely to be taking kind of a public or school bus, then we can kind of come to look to do it. So especially kids who are taking a public bus, there is a lot of bus drivers will just pull over anyway to make sure a kid doesn't want to get on, but we find in town sometimes they don't. And sometimes those kids, you know, if a bus stop's got multiple buses coming to it and they don't wave down their bus, then the bus driver will keep driving. And they don't know about taking onto the bus and all of those sorts of things, and how to use the journey planner online. So we've developed it alongside eCam to kind of help children kind of learn about catching the bus, which we've delivered it. It's been very well loved, even more so by the teachers who have learnt a lot. So it's been quite good in that sense. And then the Making a Difference and Creating a Change is kind of a workshop that's been developed for if there's a leadership group at a school who's kind of wanting to either take something to community board or kind of create a campaign for within their school. It's kind of just like a simple workshop for that, where we can come along, help them out, either maybe develop a video or develop a presentation, kind of whatever that is that might be for them. We have walking school bus workshops. So these are kind of more directed around helping people learn how to run a walking school bus and how they work. Free room requests, so anything kind of parking enforcement, P3, all of that sort of stuff. We used to make schools do school travel plans to be able to kind of do it. It's not so relevant out here, but we now kind of just do it within the program, so it still needs to come to community board for approval and things like that. But yeah, we don't put them through that. However, those kind of big ticket items, as you guys probably know, the high dollar value items, we do normally still look at a full school travel plan to kind of make sure that it's, you know, is that what the community is wanting, and all that sort of stuff. So all the schools, no matter if they're on the program or not in Christchurch, can access our March Walkaway to School Week. So this one, we had 105 registrations for this year, which is quite cool. So we also opened it up this year to Selwyn, Waimak, West Coast and Hurunui, which was quite amazing. So our little event is growing quite a bit. Because it keeps growing and because people love it so much and we get a lot of feedback from schools that they want one every single term. We have launched this year an October version just to test the waters to see how it goes. It's a little bit more dialed back, so we'll see how they kind of react to that and see how that's taken. So yeah, so we're quite excited for that. I've noticed a couple of your schools are already signed up, which is great. So every year in May, Break run Road Safety Week, which kind of schools register on their website, so we normally jump on board and support with that. The same with Rail Safety Week, but Track Safe and Kiwi Rail kind of partner with that, and we are more so this year jumping on board with that one. World Car Free Day. It always lands in school holidays for the weekend, but we try and kind of encourage schools to kind of do some publicity either when kids get back and things like that around it, and more make it a date in September rather than that specific date, or try and challenge kids at home that day to not use the car. We also have Cycle Safe. So as most of you probably aware, it's been around for a long time, but it's a program run by our Cycle Safe team for Year 6 students in Christchurch. So we deliver around 3,600 students every year. We also have Crash Bash. So this is our high school road safety education kind of program. So it's a tour done over kind of in term 1, a 5-week tour done around our high schools with the court, theatre and police. So they put on kind of a tad more theatrical performance, which is quite engaging for the students kind of around restraints and distractions and impairment. And the script's kind of written in partnership with us, looking at what have been the big kind of issues for youth and what's coming up in those crash statistics and things like that. So they're kind of not 100%, well, they're realising they're getting road safety messaging, but it's kind of not in a dry, kind of more of in a fun human sense. other resources we have. So we also have bike maps and different flyers and all sorts that we can kind of hand out to schools that we let them know about when we are there. What's really cool is that we know it makes a difference. So this is some stats, unfortunately there's none from any of your schools, but some stats that we've done from before we've worked with schools, right when we've just started to work with them, and then after we've kind of worked with them, and we've definitely kind of seen those drops happen. Lucky for us, Sweden still also moved, so that kind of quite helped us a lot. Our program also just won an award earlier this year at the Safe and Sustainable Transport Association for New Zealand kind of conference, so that was quite cool. So yeah, so what we're kind of doing is kind of being looked at nationally as kind of a way forward to kind of being able to engage with a large group of schools at once instead of only being able to work with 8 or so a year, normally under a school travel planning kind of perspective. And again, it costs nothing to work with us, so that should never be a barrier for them. And I've raced through that, weary that normally I ask for a lot more time. But yeah, does anyone have any questions?
Racing through that.
That's all right.
Amazing amount of stuff that you guys do. Fantastic. I guess I have a question around the high school one with the drama because I've got kids in high school. They did something recently, but it wasn't a drama thing. How many schools does it get around all of that? Would be like impossible to get around all the schools.
They got around most of the schools have to book it in.
Right.
What school did they go to?
Lincoln.
I don't know if it got out to Lincoln because that is Selwyn. So
Yeah,
Selwyn, we do go out to Selwyn normally.
That would be right.
Yeah, so we normally go out to Hurunui, Waimak and Selwyn, but it's kind of up to those road safety coordinators to book those schools in. But yeah, I don't know if we got out there this year.
Right.
But yes, we normally do. Yeah. Yeah, if anyone had any questions about any particular schools.
Not banks mentioning schools, but just generally, do you have any statistics on just our schools and what the uptake is based on what those side of things are?
I don't specifically like as a specific, but it is pretty broad to be honest. Like we do have like Rowley School, for example, is on board, and then we also like I think Medbury School's on board as well, which is private school. So it's very varied. So we have around about 52 of the 145 schools in Christchurch signed up, and we only started not maybe 10 months ago. We kind of launched the program into schools, which was a soft launch for the first 4 months. So yeah, it's as soon as we put it out, they grabbed, which we yeah, not put it out too fast because we have to manage it coming in. But yeah, that's good.
Yeah, thank you. Well, information I did know about a few things. It's good to you go through the presentation. Peninsula, I'll give you an example. Not every community can participate into a walk to school program, especially if are coming from outer base or another side of Harvard. So, are there any ways to engage those kids because they don't bike, they can't walk? So, how they would learn these skills?
Yeah.
Teaching.
Yeah, so typically the like our workshops and stuff like that schools can book in. It doesn't really matter if the kids are biking or walking or scooting and things like that. Same with like Walk to School week. We encourage those, I guess, sometimes we refer to them as rural schools or sometimes just kids who live ages away from school. We encourage those schools to almost have wheels days, or like I know Akaroa, I think they do it almost every Wednesday or the first Wednesday of every term or something, is that kids will bring their scooters to school and they get the court time to be able to use their scooters and their bikes. And that just creates that exposure to be able to use it not necessarily be able to kind of travel to school to be able to use it because they live on the outside of the bay or something like that, but you know, just that time of being able to, you know, use a scooter, and then if later in life they kind of move away, then they're able to, you know, still have those skills to be able to use it. But yeah.
Yeah, one more question in terms of making it safe to travel from their house to school. They have to wait for a bus, or in some routes that I know there is no bus shelter of any sort. Does this program help with those sort of infrastructure development as well?
We don't necessarily hold the budgets for it, but the schools can kind of work with us. So we work typically, we will, when we're working with the school, we'll kind of act as the face for kind of council or the transport unit. So we won't make them be like, oh, you need to go talk to this person and this person and this person. We'll be like, okay, that's your issue with this, and we'll go find the people and chat to them and bring them back. Sometimes we'll bring that person back because we're like, oh, I don't even know anything about that. We come and talk to them about it. And so that, because I do, like when I first started, like it's so easy to get lost in council very quickly, trying to find someone. So we'll kind of take away that process and we'll find those people for them. So no, not necessarily, we won't do the bus shelter, but we would try and find the right people to do the bus shelter. And same with, we have the contacts at Ministry of Education and the infrastructure team, and also their transport kind of team, that we could let them know, hey, the school's brought this up. Is this something you can help with and address when you're kind of reviewing this? So we can put them in touch with the different people.
So it is the school that has to raise that concern with you.
Yeah. So we check in with them though. Once they're on the program, we check in with them about every 3-ish months normally, to be like, hey, what's going on? Anything you want to chat about or anything like that? But yeah, they've kind of got that constant engagement going on. Some are probably better at reaching out than others.
Yes.
Yeah. One last question from Kim.
So what have our schools been questioning or bringing up?
They actually have been very quiet recently. Yeah, I know. When I first started, I was like, oh, okay, everything's going on over there. No, they've kind of just been like having a look. Predominantly, like they are engaging in what we're doing. I think we're all just very aware that these students kind of come in from kind of a wider kind of sense. So we are, I guess, slowly kind of working with them one by one to kind of be like, okay, so how can we work with you, and how can we bespoke things a wee bit more to kind of work for your school community, and kind of work with you in that way. Because I guess a lot of things can be easily duplicated in our more urban city centre sense. But you know, what we do at Governor's Bay and Little River would be probably very different to what I would do like at Whanoi School in the city centre or something like that. So, and we sometimes find that, you know, even I have that in our Tawhiri, which is our central city school, what I do there is very, very different to what I would do at some other schools. So, I don't want to call them complicated schools, but there are schools that just have some different needs to what kind of goes on, and we just systematically working through them as to what they need and require.
That makes total sense.
Yeah. Just noticed one thing around the bays here, roads are very narrow, and I see Littleton School has a huge bus. I mean, our kids caught it as well. But I don't think it fills it up, but that's the comms you would have with like the Ministry of Education and stuff. And I think back then the issue was there were so many kilometers of school, a child was able to catch a bus, but then there were kids kind of just under that kilometer and they had to walk. So they had to kind of find some safety measures for them. Yeah. So I think hopefully that's all resolved.
It sounds like there could be a lot of case by case stuff. It's great that you're there to help and work with the schools on that.
Yes, fantastic. So they can, it's not on there, but they can email us. It's just schooltravel@ccc.gov.nz about anything they've kind of got going on, and kind of work with them on it.
Okay. Thanks for coming in today. Really appreciate it. Love your work. I say thanks to the team for all the stuff that they do.
The team of 3 of us.
Yeah, you're doing great stuff. Thanks for coming in today to explain all of this.
Thank you for your time today.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bridget, thanks you for being patient. Sorry, we were speeding ahead with our day there. So come, and Sarah, come on up. We're going to be hearing about hybrid reporting. Fantastic.
It might be easier for you to sit here so that you can operate Hybris through the.
And hi to Tyrone online there. I can see you on Zoom. Can you hear us okay?
His mouth did move. All right, good morning. I'll introduce myself. I'm Sarah Newman. I'm here at Citizen and Customer Services at Council. In Council, we have a team called, in Customer Services, we have a team called Operational Process and Insights. And the manager in that team is Bridget Latimer. Morning. Which has been with us for a couple of years now. And that team deliver regular reporting across the organisation, but also into community boards and to elected members. The reporting that Bridget's going to share today is in relation to service requests. So, as you probably know, service requests is a very big work stream for council. This is a way that the community can bring issues to the attention of the council. They get a reference number, a ticket number, and then that process is taken care of throughout the organisation. So Bridget has been doing, we've had reporting for a while, we've seen a monthly report. So Bridget's been doing some refinement to that. We got some feedback from some other community boards. We thought, well, why don't we share it with you all? But also some opportunity for your governance team to support you in relation to when you are looking at those reports, how you can delve down deeper, particularly in relation to what might be really pertinent to your ward or your areas. So I'll hand over to.
I know we've done it several times today already, but we've got new people.
Yes.
Should we introduce ourselves again?
Very good.
Yeah.
I'm Roger Harrison, Efferone Bays.
Hi, I'm Lynn from Wariwa.
I represent Efferone Bays.
Kathy Lumweb, Littleton Subdivision.
And Gillian Frater from Littleton Subdivision.
Just to make sure. I don't see Tyrone on the screen.
That's right.
Yeah, so as Sarah introduced, my name's Bridget. We tried to do a lot of improvements, so which we've only recently done, but you should have seen them coming out from last month. We were trying to kind of get it in line with the financial year. And the three questions that I was trying to answer were, what are we being asked to do? What is the volume of what we're being asked to do? What is it about? And are we meeting the timeframes that we're promising people? So what we've done is we've put it into a dashboard which all the advisors have access to. So it's quite dynamic, which is great because it means that they are going to be able to answer the questions and do some drill downs and things as you want. So the first page, what I'm just going to do is pop it on June, because that was the last one that we had. But what you could see there is that you can put it through for any combination of different months and things. So that answers, I think you asked a question about the last 24 months and the comparison. So what you can do is have a look at the last financial year for 22, 23, 23, 24 and compare the two just by clicking on the different months that you want, start to see. We got rid of a lot of what I didn't think it was particularly great the way, particularly informative the way we were presenting some of the numbers on the front page. So what we've now got is the total number of reported tickets for that month, how many have been closed and resolved, and how many are still open. The ones where it talks about programmed work, this is ones where we've sent back to the customer and said, hey, thank you very much. This is now on a program of work and it will be done within so many months in order to be able to do. So it's things like a lot of transport ones go on like that as well. So it gives them some information and tells them that it's coming, but it hasn't actually closed off the ticket as yet. Out of those closed tickets, it then shows how many have been resolved, just a percentage of how many have been resolved within the SLA. And it's not so much the contractual SLAs that we think about sometimes. This is the SLA that we have an expectation for our customers. So every time someone pops in a service request and they get the response back saying, thank you very much, here's your ticket number, and we have a result, we should have this resolved by X date based on all the different service levels that are within the system. So it's the expectation that we've set for the customer, and we can change that sometimes as well, because what we're trying to do, even though the news might not be great, at least we're setting the correct expectation as well. So what that's measuring is, have we done it within the time frame that we've gone back and promised? And then what it will show you is the top 10 incident categories. So these are the high level categories. The one that I like to use, that top one there, is water supply. And that could be a lot of different things feeding into it. It could be water leaks. It could be all sorts of other things that come into it. So we just showed the top high level and how many tickets have made up that 361. And then underneath, we go down to object category, which is the one that the details slightly underneath that. So here, for example, you can see that there's water supply, water leaks, and all the different ones come up here. So that just gives a really high level, how many and what have they been about. And I also think what's useful sometimes too is what channels are they starting to come in from as well. So we can see the percentage that are coming in through Snapsend Solve, coming in through our website as well. That's really similar to what you've been seeing already, just albeit tweaked a little bit. And that's the bit that would go up onto the website. Then what we have behind that is for those top 10, the different SLAs, how many tickets have been done for those particular categories within SLA. And again, you can see here it's showing the different percentages. So for water leaks, out of there was 72.09 were done with an SLA, and there were 12 tickets here that weren't, as at this point in time, because as you can understand, tickets then get closed, and so it sort of moves on. We send out the static report second business day of the month so that we have a fixed point in time, but because it's dynamic, it will move as more tickets are closed. What we've also done is given a bit of a time series, and we've only put the top 5 on here, because otherwise if you put 10, then you're looking pretty hard to see things. And it just gives an idea of across the past few months what the volume of tickets are. And I think this is why we're trying to paint that story for you, because you can see here water leaks 72.09. But then what you can also see here is water leaks. They had this big spike here in January as people were coming back from holidays, or as though they were noticing leaks and things like that more in the summer. And so you can kind of start to see that correlation between the two. The one that I'm really happy that we've managed to include is a ticket map as well. Now, forgive me, I'm not going to put in Banks Peninsula because then it pulls every Banks Peninsula in the world. So I'm going to put in Akaroa and narrow it down a bit quicker for you.
Oh, how many other Banks Peninsulas are there?
I do know, I'm just saying that because I do know Banks Peninsula.
I've had several people complain to me that they pulled in leaks and got a message back that it's been closed, but it's not complete. Two big water leaks around one of the bed and one.
Okay, can we save that for a question at the end?
Yep,
That would be a good one.
Both seem to have that.
Yeah, oh, totally. Yeah.
So what we do give you is the static map at the end of the month is what we call these grouped tickets. So you can see the really big kind of the really big dots where they have lots of different tickets, but it does allow us to drill down. So if we wanted to see the two in devotionals, for example, we can drill in and actually see where they're coming from. And your advisors have got access to be able to do that for all sorts of different ones. And again, these are a hover as well. You can kind of see that what these are about if you hover over them too.
So what is the status of the ones in devotional? Can you see the status and the details of the job?
They will be the current open ones. Yeah. I don't think it does show the status of you. It just shows the object category.
Okay.
So any feedback appreciated, but we're trying to get the balance between giving enough information to be helpful, but obviously a whole list of tickets is a bit much. So hopefully we've got that balance reasonably well for you.
Oh, I know.
Okay.
Great question.
Right, yeah, feedback on the it's a very sensitive issue in Aotearoa because there's all sorts of being assumptions made around stormwater and wastewater issues. There's been, I know I've seen these leaks myself, and they've been, people have said they've done CSRs and they've had the information back and they haven't been dealt with. And they're quite big leaks. I think Aotearoa is really prone to it because it's got that real cheap plastic piping and there's a lot of stones in the ground, so it's a very vulnerable area for that. And I just wonder how that might be ticked off as finished, how that could slip through. I mean, it's a systemic issue, I suggest, wouldn't it? I keep saying we'll go back. I just keep telling we'll go back and redo it or whatever.
It's very hard to know without looking at the ticket specifically, but what should happen in an ideal world is obviously when it's closed, then it has been completed, or I know this isn't probably necessarily the case with what you're describing, but there might be other ones where they've closed it, but they haven't fixed it. They've put it on that program of work. So that's just a matter of putting in a specific status that we've trained people of, and it will come through. If someone does find that, the best thing is to call back to the customer service centre, because we do have an escalation process rather than just putting in a ticket. What we can do is escalate that so that it actually gets some review on it, and we have a whole process around that to make sure. Yeah.
And we escalate that through staff, don't we?
For the CSRs, no, you escalate it through the.
Okay, so we've got a number.
Yeah. So you can. There is an email. The team leaders and customer services will provide that service for you as elected members, where they will go and work through the business about what's happened to that ticket.
Yeah.
So you email that email address, they will come back to you and tell you how long that'll, when you can expect a response from them. And then there's 4 team leaders in our team. One of them will go off and work with the business to see what's happened to that ticket. Yeah. More than happy for you to do that. That's an escalation process.
Last week with the best experience though is when the resident logs the water leak and when they do that, isn't it?
Absolutely. So it does get confusing if you're logging tickets on behalf of residents, because they won't get the communication. The communication then will come to you. But certainly that support to a resident, because it can be incredibly frustrating if they've asked council to do something and it appears like it's being done. That's where that escalation process of coming directly to customer services team leaders will help, because we will definitely go and look into see what's happening. Now, some time back, we did have a problem where when something was put onto a program of work, people got told the ticket was closed and the work clearly was not done. That has been fixed, and they should get a notification that says it's been put on the program of work. So there'll be some interim measure taken that they're looking to do something, a bigger piece of work, which is why it's been put on the program.
So what about the example of somebody's got a few tickets and nothing's been done and they come to you? Should they escalate it, or should we follow that up? What's your recommendation?
So then do you mean somebody who's a resident?
Yes, a resident.
Yeah. They should come to the customer services team, ring that 941 8999. We're there 24/7, and those staff member will be able to look into the ticket, see what notes are in there, and know who to escalate it to. Yeah.
And if they've done that a few times,
then if they've done that and have come to you about it, go to that team leader email box and we can look into it. So that's so it's CS, I'm sure Penelope has it, CS team leaders, which stands for customer service.
so if we just did CS, it would come up with it.
And it's in the attachments of the information, but we'll make sure.
So that's definitely a way that we put that into place to help.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. I have some good experience working with customer service, so thank you. While we are on this example, I just want to give you an example of one of the tickets that I read through Connect and so on. It was flooding issue in the ocean. That was August last year. So, and I have spoken to DC, who leads the building in the ocean, and the school, that the area is going to flooding. But nothing has been done around there. And I've spoken to school, followed up, and people who have got leads for the gallery and the art center and physical. They live right on the edge on the waterfront side, on State Highway, but the flooding behind is quite severe. And they are quite worried about it, given winter, what would happen if it floods again. So I followed up on that, but haven't heard anything done. I got Snapshot ID number. I can forward it to staff.
So you're asking what they would recommend
Yeah.
to do?
So what in this?
Yeah, we could take that number and see what's happened to it. It can be a wee bit confusing sometimes with Snaps and Solve because they give you a number. So Snaps and Solve is a great app. But lots of people, as you can see by that guy, lots of people like to use it because it's easy to use. But it's a third-party app. It's not a council app. And so you get a notification and a number, and then we have integration into our system, our hybrid service request system, where you get another number. And that's the number you need to care about because that's the number that council is going to be using and looking to actually request off. And that's where you get the notifications from council.
I think I received that notification there. Pickup number.
Yeah.
So,
More than happy for us to look into that. For you.
okay, so that would be good. I'll just forward that.
I also noticed that Tyrone has had his hand up for a wee while there. We have noticed you, Tyrone. Do you have a question?
Yep, I have a number, so just get to me whenever.
Sorry, what was that, Tyrone?
I have about 4 questions.
Yes, you can go for it now. Yeah.
So just go now? Okay, cool. So you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So the first one is, and it's kind of been touched on through this discussion, but I'm just going to take you through a scenario of what often happens when a member of the public raises a ticket. So in the classic example is Dyer's Pass Road that runs between Governor's Bay and Cashmere. So what happens is there's an obstruction in a stormwater drain, and someone will lodge a ticket, and then, in one example, 18 minutes later, the resident got a ticket to say that the issue had been resolved. Now, obviously, that can't be resolved in 18 minutes, but what I speculate has happened is that we've closed it off because it's been passed on to the contractor, where we immediately lose visibility of the issue, and then we don't have a view on when that's going. So there's no, because once it's with the contractor, we don't have visibility of where it's at, what the time frame is, or anything. So how do we address that gap in visibility, or is that something that is being addressed?
So
does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does, absolutely. That shouldn't happen. We have some contractors that have access to our system, so we don't close tickets when we send it to a contractor. They can go in there and update them or provide information back to the various teams in council. It did get confusing with when we placed it on a program of work and it will get closed. But now people should get a notification saying, yes, it's been placed on a program of work, but it's not been completed. They should get that notification. That should be fixed. Something being closed in 18 minutes sounds like something has gone wrong.
Resolved.
Yeah, that does sound very odd. So probably, Tara, the only thing I can suggest is if you give us the number, if you've got that ticket number, we can look into that to see what happened. Because that should.
Okay, where would you like me to send that ticket number?
Okay, send it to me.
And Penelope can pass it on to us. Yeah. We'll have a look into it.
Sorry, who am I sending it to?
Penelope.
To Pen?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, cool. Can I ask another question?
Yeah, please.
Cool. So when a job is closed, does the raiser get a notification to say that the job has been completed, like it's physically been completed? Because I don't believe they do, but maybe we've changed the process.
Yeah. They should do. I think
so. For using the Dyers Pass Road example again,
yeah.
like when the contractor has shoveled the stuff out of the stormwater drain, will the raiser get a notification to say the stuff's been shoveled out of the stormwater drain?
Well, the trick is though, you have to say you want notifications.
Oh.
Only 30% of all of our service requests do people tick they want a notification.
So no, there was a tick place.
Yeah,
Okay,
you
so it's about
actually have
reading.
to ask, otherwise you won't get them. The only notification you'll get is obviously the acknowledgement. You'll get your initial acknowledgement and the ticket number and the time frame. But if you haven't told us you want to be kept informed of progress, you won't get the rest of the notifications.
Oh, okay. So where's that tick is possible via the website, is it? The council website? Because I raise most of my tickets by emailing info at, basically through the email route, and that's not an option to ask for notifications to be sent.
So if you ring council, you talk to a staff member and they should ask you, do you want to be kept informed? And they tick the box for you. If you email to info at, again, that's an email that comes to a customer service staff member and they raise the ticket. So they should ask you if you want to be kept informed. If you do it online, there is a box to say, do you want to be kept up to date? Is that the same as Snaps and Solve? Yes. So Snaps and Solve, again, you have to say, yes, I want to be kept informed.
When you get a confirmation back, it also gives you the option it says, hey, we'd like to keep you informed. If you want to click here, if you'd like to change it as well. So there's another option there too, if you forget at the beginning.
Okay. What was that, sorry?
I said fire ahead. If you've got another question, we've got time.
Oh, okay, cool. I do. I've just got to try and think what it is.
It's all right, we can talk amongst ourselves. That's fine.
No, come back to me. Come back to me. It's just slipped my mind for a second.
Okay, no problem. Do we have any other questions around the table? Because we've probably got room for another couple. Yes.
Yes, so I just had a question of clarification based on my experience so far, but just to clarify, as a community board member, basic, which avenue should we first go? So I had tried the email address that I had, is it info@Peninsula something, but what's the best avenue to the first, if someone comes to me and then I say, oh yeah, I'll inquire about that.
If a resident is coming to you for you to follow up, so it's not your service request, then I suggest you use that CS team leader, so customer services team leader email box.
Okay.
And we can look into it for you.
Yeah.
But
if you are raising, sorry.
But that's when they've already been trying.
Yes.
For quite a few weeks, probably.
Yeah, if it's a resident with a brand new thing and they think you're going to deal with it, then you say you need to log a request yourself. Get the resident to do it. So you don't become their secretary. And then they get, but then if that gets stuck, that's when they come to you and you can escalate it to the community services team leader.
Customer services.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Customer services team leader.
Yeah. So if I've already raised the ticket, been told it's been closed or whatever, and now they're escalating it with you because it doesn't look like council's doing what they've asked.
Right.
That's when you can send it to that customer services team leader.
And then if it's me directly?
Whatever, give them that we're 24/7, whatever works for you. I mean, some people love to use Snaps and Solve. If that works for you, that would be the mechanism I would use. Or just pick up the phone. There's somebody there and they'll ask you all the questions.
We'll have Kathy next and then we'll finish with Tyrone's question.
Have you done a newsline article on Snap and Solve or that sort of stuff to kind of get, okay, that's good.
People love it. And I think
Yeah.
when around Christmas time was the last time we sent one out. Yeah. Huge numbers of, yeah.
Tyrone, it's back to you. Yep.
Thank you. Oh, yep, cool. So I just want to just quickly revisit the when you send a request via info at CCC. What is it? What's the address? Whatever, you know the one, like the customer service info CCC. So the first email I get when I do that is thank you for contacting Christchurch City Council. We understand your email. If it's high urgency or it's health and safety, please call our team, right? So it tells me that, but it doesn't tell me to let someone know that I want to be notified. So then the follow-up one I get from when that is, thanks for getting in touch. The request has been put through to our contractor internal team to get this fixed. We'll make sure they contact you in regards to this process. Your job number is this. You'll receive an automatic confirmation. Please feel free to reply or contact us, but it doesn't say, please specifically let us know to send you notifications about it. So where does that information come back to the requester in that process to say you specifically need to ask for notifications?
So Tyrone, are you looking at the website when you're talking about filling in a?
I'm just looking at my email trail when I've sent it for a request that I've sent. I got 2 emails back to say, yep, we're looking into it, but it doesn't say you need to let us know if you want notifications all the way through to the closure of this ticket.
Yeah. Probably what I'll need to do, if you're okay, I'll look into that. We'll go back to the office and have a go on that same journey ourselves. And maybe the language is ambiguous, or maybe it's not there. Are you okay if we come back to you? We'll come
Sure,
back to you.
no worries.
Fine.
Sweet as. Thank you. So as a follow-up to that, so I know this used to happen in the past, and so sometimes you'd get an email back that would say, thank you for your ticket, and here's the number, but it wouldn't tell you what it was for. So you weren't 100% sure which particular request, and if you're like me, when you're raising requests left, right, and centre. So I guess I'm looking for some assurance that every single email going back to a requester is going to give them a little bit of a heads up as to what it's about.
Yeah, I think probably 8 months ago we did quite a lot of work. One of the things we fixed, because we got lots of feedback about that and people were confused about it, quite rightly. So that should be fixed. You should get told this is in relation to whatever it was. You should get that. Okay. And at the same time as when we fixed telling you it had been completed when actually it had been placed on a program of work. That was also a change that was made at that time.
Okay, that's helpful actually, yeah, because I probably haven't done the in-depth study to check that had changed, but that's commensurate with my experience recently, I think, so that's good.
The other thing that we did at the same time was if people use SnapSendSolve, was pop that SnapSendSolve number into the subject line as well. So if you did a lot of them, you could match them to the SnapSendSolves that you did too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, it does seem to have improved, so I appreciate the work done on that one. I reckon that's probably it for me for questions. Thank you.
That's it, Tyrone. We're out of time, so that was good timing. Thank you very much. Because we've probably been here for quite a while, really, to be honest. And it's a fantastic resource. Obviously, it's being used, and we were just at the Community Services Award just on Monday, and I talked to a lot of people who use it and are very happy with it. So, yeah, fantastic. And it's great to see it's always being improved and always being changed, and that you are happy to listen to some of our suggestions as well. That's really encouraging. So thank you very much for coming today.
Absolutely.
Appreciate your time so much.
Great. Hope the reporting helps.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Very exciting. Thank you. Right, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and be here just after 12 10. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
See you later. Very much appreciate it.
It's good
so
that you
much.
got that thing sorted out. I know. Yeah.
Let us know when we're
On.
we're on.
You want to be here too? You want to be here or just sit on
Yeah, you can join us a bit. Yeah. You're there. Oh, just where you take the head of the table, no?
Hi Angus and the team. What have you got there?
Hello. So you all know me, Angus Smith, the property consultancy manager. And
Kia ora koutou. My name's Claire Fletcher. I'm the engagement advisor on the engagement team.
Just be aware we don't have video, but we do have a microphone just where Linda is there with the computer. So it should pick you up, but just know that unfortunately we've got IT issues today. Thank you for that.
And Paul Gibbons on that ball. All right, thank you. Look, I'll start off the presentation, then I'll hand over to Claire to deal with the comms and engagement bit of it. But I'll start at the very beginning. So we're here today to talk about this block of land in Pūrau, which is held by the council as a reserve and commonly known as a Māori reserve. Now, this community board considered this in 2018 and 19 and considered a proposal to return that to Ngāti Whiki because it is a Rūrapa site. And that ran into some issues and got put on hold. And I'll cover that off. So Ngāti Whiki and DOC and the council have continued discussions since that time. And we're now at a point where there is a pathway to consider that proposal. So we just want to outline that. So the purpose of this is just to inform you of the proposal to return the property to Ngāti Whiki and the process that would need to occur for that to happen, if that was the desire of the council. And we're going to outline a consultation plan and get the board's feedback on that. So look, this block of land, it's 177 Pūrau Ave, it's referred to as Pūrau Māori Reserve. It's 1,381 square metres. It's held under the Reserves Act. It's got a long history and chain of ownership, but currently the status is, and has been for a long time, that it is a reserve for public reserve purposes. And it has been used over the years as a recreation reserve, which would be considered an appropriate use for what is a Rūrapa site. And that is the crux of why we're considering this matter. As I said, it's been a topic of conversation for a number of years. And there is a view that it should be returned to Ngāti Whiki, because that establishes appropriate ownership, management and control of the site. So that I've outlined the objectives here, which I've gone through. It's about where does appropriate ownership, management and control reside. There are a number of statutory processes. Should council wish to support the proposal, there's a number of statutory considerations the council need to undertake, not the least of which is they would need to revoke the reserve status, giving the council an unencumbered fee for simple title that they could deal with. And that has a statutory process around it. So what has changed since 2018-19? And I know one of the board members has a question about that, so we'll cover that off in question and answers. But what has changed is the Department of Conservation are now indicating they would support the reserve revocation process, which in 2019 they would not. I can cover that in more detail when we deal with Howard's question. So what we're doing at the moment is we're writing a full options report, which we're looking to bring to the community board on the 12th of August. which will go to the council as part A item for some decisions based on the board's recommendations on the 4th of September. I've covered off the fact we need to revoke the reserve status. We also need to, under Section 78 of the Local Government Act, consider views and preferences of affected parties. So Claire will cover that off and how we would deal with that in the consultation process. What we'll be proposing is that any submissions from both those consultation requirements will be heard by a hearings panel. Hearings panel would then report that to council, at which point council would decide do they want to proceed with A, revoking reserve status, and B, transferring property back to Ngāti Wheke. So just recapping, there's two aspects to the reserve process. To the consultation process, we would run those in parallel. The doc revocation process requires a notice to be put in the press in 30 days, and then we would, and we're going to outline that in a minute, we would deal with the views and preferences aspect of Local Government Act in parallel at the same time, and bring that, both those aspects together into the hearings panel report. So I'll hand it over to Claire and she can go through the consultation and engagement.
Thank you. So what you saw in the previous slide was the legal requirements or direction through the Local Government Act and the Reserves Act that we must adhere to in this process. And so if we attain endorsement and approval to go ahead to commence the process, we do need to make sure that we're speaking to the particularly impacted audience. Looking at previous feedback from 2018, I think the audience is, and now, the audience is definitely obviously the Pūrao residents and batch owners, the residents group, the Diamond Harbour Reserves Committee as well, who have an interest in how spaces and landscapes are managed within the area, or green spaces are managed within the area, and other runanga. Taking into account then the requirements under the Act and the feedback that we have been able to find on the previous engagement process that happened in 2018, my recommendation is that we do direct mail to all homeowners as well as a leaflet drop to all households, because we do have absentee owners over there. Emails to the previous participants, we still have their contact details, so we'll contact them directly, and go face to face in requesting meetings with the residents group, the Diamond Harbour Reserves Committee, and runanga that may wish to meet face to face, other than Ngāti Wheke. We'd also put a public notice in the local paper to cover off our requirements. That is the tactics that I propose that we take for this process, taking into consideration the number of people affected, but I'm more than happy to take feedback based on that approach now before we put forward a final outline in the next meeting.
Right now?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're happy to deal with any questions, particularly feedback on the comms and engagement process.
Any other input about target audience and tactics to get to them, especially from people in this particular area?
Will this be similar to what's happened with Tipa? Is it the same similar sort of process? Or?
Yes, yeah, it is, except the difference would be the decision here would run through a hearings panel before it gets to the council. Yeah.
Who's the hearings panel comprised of?
I'm not too sure. I drafted a report that's being reviewed by our legal team, and they're having a conversation this afternoon with me and Pierce, who will decide the composition of that hearings panel. I think there's some pros and cons and issues around whether the board comprises the hearings panel. And I think Megan and I are suggesting that is not the case, but legal are looking at that at the moment. If the board was the hearings panel, they would not be able to make a submission. Whereas if it was a separate hearings panel made of other elected members, which may comprise board members, but then the board would be able to put a submission in. So, but the hearings panel process, the hearings panels are normally brought together by Megan.
Tyrone's got his hand up there as well. So do you have a question, Tyrone? You've got your microphone off. Sorry.
Sorry about that, Madam Chair. I do have a question. Thank you. Yes, I well remember the this coming to the board in 2018 because it was my first ever community board meeting, and it was quite, it was quite overwhelming at the time. I recall there was quite significant pushback from the community in Pūrō not the community, just parts of the community at the time, due to the kind of the loss of what they considered to be a public space. And so, with recreation amenity, now we know the cultural reasons why that's not right, but what communications can we make differently this time? And how are we going to approach it differently compared to last time? Because I don't think that pushback is going to go away. Or maybe it will, I don't know. But yeah, so just the difference in approach, because I guess the very real thing for me is that, as far as I'm concerned, it's a cemetery, and, I don't think anybody would really want to have a cemetery desecrated. And so, how much of that narrative is going to be part of the sort of the consultation approach as well.
Thanks, Tyrone. We do intend to share that narrative and share the story of what the space is. I do note from the recorded feedback from last time, there was a lot of concern around the foreshore as well, in terms of being able to continue to use it. Because the conversation started as a foreshore landscape plan, and then historically we found out information about this particular piece of land. What I can say, Tyrone, is that there is another project in planning for the landscaping of the foreshore, knowing what we now do know. And so when we have conversations with the community, if it's approved on 177, we're hoping to be able to bring them a high level plan of what that proposal is for landscaping, to point to the recreational factors in the other areas of Pūrō which can be used and how they'll be enhanced in the future, for early conversations with the residents. And then there'll be a public conversation about that, or a public consultation about that at a later date when those plans are a bit more developed. So the narrative will definitely point towards the history of Pūrō, the fact this is a cemetery, and I would like to make sure that we cover a lot of the previous concerns that has been recorded in the previous information from the 2018 conversation around access to recreational areas for children to play, access to the foreshore in order to kayak or swim, and what will happen to that in the future, which is that it will remain in the council's responsibility and management.
So thank you. And because I guess, and Nigel alluded to the conversation around the area on Hunters Road for Te Pao Rākaihautū, and there will be this easy kind of perception that people could fall into that this is the same thing, and this is basically just put it into the same category, if you like, when it's actually a fundamentally different. Everything about it is fundamentally different So just to so I just want to make sure that we really are very clear on why we're sort of having this discussion, and it is a really distinct and unique sort of a discussion, I think. So yeah, just really want to make that clear. So that's not a question, sorry, just a comment.
No, thank you, Rona. I appreciate that.
Yeah, they are quite different considerations and quite different circumstances.
Noted. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Sounds like consultation will address the notion and the legal status or the ownership of the land, but not the use of it.
So we will work with Ngāti Whiki on what we can share around the use of that. Like, it's not appropriate for their land to be used. It's a cemetery. It's someone's great grandparents are buried there. So it's not appropriate, much like Western cemeteries, for anyone to be playing on it or having a picnic with it. We'll work with the local rūnanga Ngāti Whiki on what we can share in terms of how that may look in the future. But that also needs to go through the revocation process and application process.
Yeah.
Yes. Before they can have full and frank conversations around what that may look like in the future. So we'll share what the aspirations as much as the rūnanga members are happy for us to do so.
And then how about the aspiration of other community members? They may have aspirations. So both will be shared in community consultation process.
Yeah, I mean, there will undoubtedly, as Tyrone said, there'll be submissions on this, and I expect you'll be presented with opposing views on it, both what it is, how it's used, and how it should be used into the future. And that's something that the adherence panel will have to determine and consider all those views as to how we manage it into the future. I mean, there will be other options presented in the report other than just this one. But this is the one that staff will be recommending at this stage. But even if this doesn't go ahead, then there is an issue about inappropriate use of the site that needs to be addressed.
Gillian, and then back to Tyrone.
My question was just about whether the Urapa extends beyond the site as well, which was the impression I got previously, but perhaps I'm wrong.
The answer is probably yes to that, and that the foreshore immediately in front of it, the archaeological testing and that has shown artefacts in there, but that will be considered as part of the foreshore development project. It's certainly not going to be considered in terms of the same treatment, like transferring it to Ngāti Whiki, because it's an entirely different bit of land and very problematic in that regard. But the council will treat it with respect for its cultural values. But that is a separate consideration to the decision we're putting in front of you now. So I know I've got all blurred up last time, and we're just trying to separate out a separate decision on this particular site because it's quite different.
Thanks. Tyrone, and then we'll go to Ken for Howard's question.
Oh yeah, cool. Thank you. So who's the final decision maker on the revocation?
Council. On the
councillors or the CE?
The full council on a recommendation report from the hearings panel.
Rightio, sweet. Thank you.
Ken, have you got Howard's ones there, or have you got specific ones that were sent through?
No, there's not just, I'm only aware of Howard's one.
Yeah, it was just the question we received from Howard last week, which was sent to you. Do you want to answer that? I know it's not specifically about the consultation, which is what this is really about, but Do you want me to read that out and do you want to respond to it?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you. So Howard emailed through a question that he'd received from local Kudo residents. What is materially different today compared to the situation as it presented itself in 2018-19 when the issue was put to rest? Does the new geophysical report 2024 present any new conclusions?
So I think there's a bit of a precursor to that question, which seemed to indicate that back then Howard thought or understood from what he was presented that the issue why this didn't proceed last time was that there was questions about whether this was an Irapa site or not. But that is not the circumstances to why this was put on hold last time. What happened last time is staff presented the community board with a report. There were some questions raised by members of the public about that report, and the board asked for more information. And in the course of producing that information, a court case on a revocation or a Pātaka case was landed, and that gave DOC cause to pause the considerations nationwide about reserve revocations. And at the time, staff thought, well, there's no point in putting forward a report to revoke a reserve when DOC are not going to process it. So that's the reason it was put on hold. So in answer to the question, the circumstances that have changed, there's a couple of reasons in talking to DOC. One is they've now digested the Rākaihautū case, and the circumstances related to that are quite different as related to this bit of land. So they're now happy to look at this bit of land, and also at that time they thought this bit of land was Crown derived, and it is not Crown derived. So DOC are now indicating that they would support and process a reserve revocation application.
There's been quite a lot of clarification since 2018.
Yes. Yeah.
Tyrone, you've got a question there. Oh, and then Nigel.
Yeah, and I appreciate the answer Angus just gave. Like, that was really, really good, because I think it's really important to note that the issue was most certainly not put to bed as the question was worded. That implies that the community board made a decision to not proceed. That's not true. But the report was left to lie on the table if memory serves. And and so I mean, it's still been a live issue all the way since then, right? So yeah, there's certainly been no decision made one way or another. So I guess it would be concerning if there was a perception that the issue has been dealt with and is being relitigated. That's not the case, right?
That's not the case.
Right. Noted. Thank you, Tyrone.
So we have to be very clear about that in all the communications.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sort of not too sure whether I should even be answering this question, whether it's directly related or not. In fact, you brought up the archaeology and brought up the obviously maybe the extension of the Irapa. There was a scene of several huge battles, one with the Rākaihautū and one with the southern Ngāi came up there. Are these the bodies from there, or are they like family burials? This is sort of like my vision of a Irapa. I'm just trying to get my head around it. Like Tapakaniki is a tapu site, but then when it comes to the Irapa or Inuku, it's at Inuku. I'm just trying to understand the difference. I mean that very politely and respectfully.
We will, in the report we present, we'll provide some history on that, and that will be a topic that everybody is going to have to turn their mind to and make a decision on. But we will provide some reports on archaeological findings and some reviews of those, and you'll hear both sides of an argument on that. But that is something everybody, the community board, hearings panel and council are definitely going to have to turn their mind to make a decision on.
Well, I'm looking forward to learning more about it. It's fascinating history and important history. So thank you for your time today. This is any more burning questions. We will let you get back onto your good work. Thank you so much for being here today.
Okay, thanks for your time. Thank you.
Appreciate it. So we've got Jane and Tom online, I think. We're going to update us on the Banks Peninsula Adaptation Plan. Well, actually, Port Littleton, Port Levy.
Well, kia ora koutou, everybody. Are we driving the presentation from here, or are you driving it from there?
Just hold on a minute, Jay. We've just got a bit of transitioning going in the background, and our system is a little bit lacking with the speaker system. So we'll just wait a minute until everybody cleared the room, and so we can actually hear you. And I think we're pretty good. Thank you. Can you please repeat that again?
Oh, I'm just checking whether you want us to load the presentation and share it, or whether you already have it loaded.
Yes. That'd be great.
Tom's just doing that at the moment, so I'll just introduce us. So I'm Jane Morgan, team leader of the Coastal Hazards Adaptation Planning Program, and with me is Tom Simon-Smith, who's the technical lead. We are going to be talking to you today, giving you a bit of an update about where we've got to with the work in Whakaropō, Littleton Harbour and Kokararata Port Levy, because we are approaching the point at time in which we have a draft adaptation plan to take up for its final engagement. Did you? No, it hasn't come up. Sorry, it was up a minute ago.
No problem.
Great, there we are. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, I'm going to shoot through the start of it a little bit quickly, because we have talked to you about the process before, and of course you have representatives on the coastal panel as well throughout the process. So these are the phases of the process. We started out with engagement with preparatory technical analysis, engagement with the community, establishment of a coastal panel. We engaged with communities and what was important to them, and we used that information, or the coastal panel used that information, to assess a long list of adaptation options. Tom, you might want to just push the thanks there. And we then identified a range of potential adaptation pathways. We then went out for our second engagement with communities, and from feedback received there, the coastal panel has since been going through quite a complex process of scoring those different pathways against criteria, understanding some of the trade-offs and decisions that need to be made there, identifying some triggers and thresholds, and determining their preferred adaptation pathways, which was the stage that we reached at our last coastal panel meeting. We have previously gone out for community engagements with a series of brochures, one for each of our priority adaptation locations. However, for the final engagement, we've decided that we'll take out a draft adaptation plan alongside a consultation document to gain feedback. You'll recall that according to the Coastal Adaptation Framework, the policy settings that we are following, the recommendations for preferred adaptation options come from the coastal panel, and they then go to council for final decision. So this is the last stage before that. Essentially, we're taking out the coastal panel's preferred adaptation pathways, and then seeking a decision from council in the new year after we've had that engagement. I think that might be the last slide in that series of process steps. So I'm going to hand over now to Tom to talk about the work that the coastal panel have been doing and where they've reached.
Cool. Sweet, thanks for that, Jane. Yeah, so what I'll do now is just take us through a couple of examples from the coastal panel's work on identifying what we call preferred adaptation pathways, which are sort of like preferred options or combinations of options to manage the risks to different public assets in the Littleton Harbour and Port Levy areas. Before we get into that, just as a reminder, this is the sort of, when we're talking about adaptation pathways, this is the sort of principle that we're talking about here. So it's essentially just showing a combination of options that occur in time. In our adaptation plan, what we do is, instead of basing or indicating when things might happen based on time, we broadly indicate them based on these different indicators that are called signals, triggers, and thresholds. So an example that's shown on the screen here is for raising of a road. So if you imagine, for example, the road in Teddington, appropriate at in that location for a time, but as sea levels rise, it will be increasingly flooded, inundated by tides, heavy rainfall, and other conditions. So council will need to make a decision, for example, to either raise and flood-proof that road to limit impacts on it, or to relocate that road as an alternative pathway. And this is just just an example of what we're talking about when we talk about adaptation pathways. So happy to.
I just wanted to add one point to that, which is to state that where the coastal panel identifies a preferred pathway, which is what we're going to start talking through today, this methodology allows for change in the future, because we in reality don't know what's going to be, what the world's going to be like in 50 years' time. So while the coastal panel may have a preferred pathway that suggests maintain, then flood-proof, then relocate, the methodology allows us to keep all of those options in. So in 50 years' time, there may be a decision just to go straight to relocate, as opposed to following the pathway at the moment.
Cool. So as I said earlier, what we'll do is we'll just focus on a couple of our adaptation pathways. So I think we've got one example from Allendale and then one from Teddington, but I think we've got a total of 26 or 28 adaptation pathways, so asset-specific pathways. And yeah, so to begin in Allendale, obviously over the last sort of 18 months or so, we've had two prior engagements with the public. We had one which was around that values assessment, which was understanding sort of what matters most, what people love about these areas, and that helped the panel discern or develop these what we call community objectives, which are used and referred to in the plan, and were also used to help us score and assess different adaptation options. And some of the quotes from that public consultation are included in the bottom of this slide. So this is an example. So this is an adaptation pathway for the Allendale closed landfill, which is in the sort of centre left of the image and behind the text box here. Essentially what's indicated here is that the coastal panel's preferred pathway is an interim defence followed by a later removal of the contaminated site. In this case, it's necessary to have some interim defence because council will need to commit to some investigative work and feasibility assessment to look at the viability of removing a landfill of this scale and nature. We estimate there's around 40,000 cubic metres of waste in this site, so many tens of millions of dollars to remove. But yeah, before that can be sort of committed to, there'll need to be further investigation take place. So this is just an example of the panel's sort of position on that particular asset. Cool. So now round the bay over into the top of the harbour in Teddington, what's shown here is we've actually split the road into two different parts, and I'll sort of talk to you about why that is. So essentially, first off, we've got this blue section of road, which is Governor's Bay to Teddington Road, and then down the bottom here, we've got Charteris Bay Road. And essentially where the panel have landed with their preferred pathway in this instance is for the blue section of road to transition in time to a reduction in level of service of that road, but for the orange one to maintain it at a at a higher level of service, so essentially to maintain the current level of service. The rationale for that being that it will be extremely costly to implement flood-proofing, relocation, or other options that sort of solve the risk across this whole area. So a sort of middle or sort of prudent middle ground that was discussed by the panel was to secure the sort of critical lifeline link, which is the Charteris Bay Road section via Gebbies Pass. So this would essentially mean that some people that come from places like Diamond Harbour and Charteris might find themselves in, say, 30 or 40 years having tidal flooding across Governor's Bay to Teddington Road, so they might need to turn left and go over Gebbies Pass. This isn't suggesting that the blue section of road would be closed, but it is suggesting that we expect that the flooding impacts will increase and that there might be more frequent temporary road closures on that section of route in the future. And it's indicating that those impacts might become more pronounced in around sort of 40 odd years, which is the length of that top white line, that maintain line at the top there. Other thing here to flag is that the bottom left indicates towards the estimated costing. So those are based on if we were to build these interventions today and maintain them for 100 years, that's where we're sitting in terms of estimated costs. So around 36 million for the orange section of route to lift it by about 1 metre. So it's very expensive because we would also need to widen the road to accommodate that raised level, install culverts and other interventions. And then the blue road is also pretty costly because we would also need to raise that section of road, albeit not to the same extent as Charteris Bay Road or Teddington Charteris Bay Road. Yeah, so that's just another example we thought we would share. There are obviously alternate paths also, just to flag those dashed lines here that, as Jane mentioned earlier, we retain these for many reasons, but one of the main ones is we're talking about options over really long time frames, and to be frank, we're often uncertain about what things might happen, the rate of future sea level rise, what happens with storms, what happens with the availability of funds. The populations that depend on these roads, for example, could be subject to change also, both in positive or in negative directions. So yeah, that's why it's indicated there. I thought this, picture tells 1,000 words. So we've been, since the panel established these preferred adaptation pathways, we've been working with a local consultancy to develop some visuals that help better convey what I've tried to do with words and lines for you on the previous slide. So this visual here is again of Teddington, but this is indicating the sort of current or elevated level of service on the eastern section of the route, so the right hand side of the page here. And then you can see, as indicated by the lower road level in the grayer, or the sort of lighter colour, we're indicating there that that section of route could be maintained at a lower level of service in time. Again, this is not a change that we're suggesting is just around the corner. We're suggesting that the raising of that road on the right hand side of the page is, at least a couple of decades off, probably more like as much as 40 years away, and the lowering levels of service on the left hand side of the page, again, it's not something we expect that's not just going to switch on overnight. We expect that would be incremental as sea levels rise. But yeah, this is just some of the sort of stuff that we've been working on, and there's obviously similar visuals to this for each of our other priority adaptation locations as well. So places like Allendale and Pudo and different places. Cool. So last couple of bits from me, flag there that we've been doing these sort of specific work on different locations. So our priority adaptation locations, which are Rāpaki, Allendale, Teddington, Charters Bay, Puro and Kokorarata. But we've also been doing some sort of broader, higher level thinking in relation to some other ideas. So this is one example of a visual that we've been working on, which relates to the broader sort of access or transport strategy across the Fuller, what we call adaptation area, or the Fuller area between Littleton Harbour and Port Levy. I'll just sort of talk to a couple of elements of this so you can sort of understand what we're looking at here. So the green lines relate to sections of road where the panel have recommended towards retaining the existing levels of service. The orange lines relate to sections of route where levels of service might be liable to be reduced, albeit not starting necessarily soon. Then there are a range of different lines from different communities across water which relate to existing ferry routes, possible future or existing lifeline connections. And then you can see also a blue line in the sort of bottom of the page which relates to a section of route that was asked of us to look into, which we've considered but found, and I'm sure you can imagine for why, to be extremely costly and challenging to implement a route like that over the hill. So yeah, essentially this sort of visual is just to bring some of the work across the different sites together to reflect on how would this stuff all sort of relate to one another, and to get people thinking about some important ideas like we might not only get around, we already don't, but increasingly we might want to depend on some other modes of access and transport in the future, like access over water. And these are just some of the community objectives which were developed through consultation on the left-hand side of the page, which sort of speak to why we've been thinking about some of these ideas. I think lastly from me, this is just another visual which we propose for inclusion in the plan, or at least this is a draft version of it, which relates to the environment. So what we've found is that through our adaptation planning in a range of our different locations, there are opportunities for environmental or ecological restoration, places like Allendale, for example. So what we've wanted to do is to sort of identify some of those possible benefits that might be achieved through environmental or ecological restoration. Things like, sediment trapping, wave dissipation on the shorefront, improved water quality, potential sort of recreational and amenity benefits also. So yeah, and again, that relates and ties in really strongly with one of the community objectives that was developed through consultation as well. I think I'll pass to Jane now to sort of close out, but yeah, obviously both of us will be available for questions. Cheers.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the next couple of slides are just around our next steps. If you could just go to the next one, Tom. Thank you. So this slide sets out the structure of the draft adaptation plan. If there is anything missing there from your perspective, we'd be really keen to understand what that might be. But it's probably reasonably straightforward given the previous materials that we've shared with you. The only difference, as I say, is we're going to be putting everything out in the one draft plan as opposed to in the previous approach where we used different brochures for each of the priority adaptation locations. I think the next slide, engagement. So we have been engaging quite extensively in the area for a few years now, actually. So the first engagement that you can see up there for in 2021 was around the district-wide engagement on the adaptation framework, but the subsequent two engagements were specific to this process that we have been running in Whakaropō and Kokorarata. We've found that longer engagements haven't necessarily paid off in terms of having a lot more submissions. So with this final engagement, we're proposing a reasonably short and sharp one. Having said that, what we want to do is brief as much as possible people earlier. So we've already approached residents associations, residents groups, community associations in the area, trying to book dates in advance of our engagement period. We haven't got a definite engagement date yet, but in terms of next steps, what we're proposing to do is get sign off from ELT for the we have to get council approval to release the adaptation plan as a draft. So we're looking at going through that process in September, and we'd like to come back to you with the copy of the draft plan attached to a memo for your feedback and any further comments before it goes out to council for sign off. And ideally, we're hoping to open that engagement in October. And also interested in any other thoughts you might have around how to spread the word earlier and undertake that engagement. I think that's us. And I think we're ready for questions, so happy to jump in.
Thank you. I'm looking around the board table as we speak. We'll raise head, and Gillian's first up. So go for it.
Kia ora, Jane and Tom. My question was just about when people get it was kind of about generally the size of the plan, and I'm only thinking about that in terms of like if people get it, if they're interested, how overwhelmed they're going to be or not. So, and we're judging by other councils consultation, there's usually a big plan and then other kind of small little leaflets of some sort that condense things down if people can't handle looking at the whole big plan as it is. But can you give us some guidance about what the plan might be there?
Generally speaking, I just have to front foot the fact that this is a constant tension for us because it's complex. And there's a lot of ins and outs. What we're going up with is a draft plan with preferred pathways as proposed by the coastal panel. We need to articulate to some extent what other options were looked at and not opted for. We have to explain quite complex concepts like signals and triggers. And we're talking about a plan for 100 years. So, the idea of putting a plan on a page is really compelling, but it just isn't particularly doable. Tom has shown you some of the illustrations in this presentation, and what we're really trying to do this time is to use those pictorial devices to give people a really strong sense of what the content is. So the plan itself will have a page per priority adaptation location, and that will show some illustrations of what's proposed in the future in a way that we hope is more engaging and more readily accessible to people once it's out.
Great, thank you. What is the potential for working with reserve committees, and how might that work? So would that be through the board, or would you do that directly with reserve committees, or is that even an option?
Working with them to engage around the draft plan?
Yes, yeah.
That's certainly something we can explore, yeah.
Great, awesome. Any other areas that people are thinking that need to be communicated with around the table?
Just to give them a chance to gather their thoughts, and also to jump on that last question. Absolutely agree with Jane's answer, but just in addition is that in the adaptation plan that we're currently drafting, we are flagging also that there might be opportunities for like groups such as reserve committees or other sort of active parts of the community to really support council with some of the adaptation actions that might fall out of the plan. So, for example, for Allendale Reserve, the coastal panel are recommending towards a sort of naturalisation, which could be sort of landscaping and planting and other work like that, of which would be well aligned with reserve committees and other sort of like-minded groups. So there could be roles for those organisations sort of in terms of implementation of the plan as well. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Tyrone's got a question, then we'll go with us and afterwards.
Oh yeah. So just on the far off into the future, the idea that, for want of a better word, you'd prioritise the route through Gebbies rather than towards Governor's Bay at that T-junction there in Teddington, let's just say. So, I mean, sort of tied up in that, of course, is that, you know, you don't have to drive very far towards Diamond Harbour from Teddington to find another low-lying bit of road that's going to be equally incredibly expensive to maintain, right? So, like, I mean, so it's not just the bit between Teddington and, you know, the hill that's kind of vulnerable. It's like over the hill in Charteris Bay is vulnerable, around the Marine Drive is, I mean, it's all tied up, isn't it? So that's like a mega project all up, really, isn't it?
Yep, and that's why we shared.
I mean, they're inextricably linked, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That transport strategy visual that we shared, that's kind of part of exactly your point there, Tyrone, is that we had the green line for that part of Governor's Bay, Teddington, Charteris Bay, but then also Marine Drive, because they're sort of the key connection points to these larger populations in places like Charteris and Diamond Harbour, for example. But yeah, absolutely. So while we didn't speak about it today, the panel have obviously also made recommendations towards how to manage the risk on Marine Drive, which, to be frank, is more proximate in terms of the impacts than in Teddington. So,
totally. Yeah. But I mean, like, and just humour me here, like, in theory, like, you know, I mean, we've got a 50-year time frame or 40-year time frame that we're dealing with here. Like, you know, $100 million to fix a road on Littleton Harbour is an unpalatable number, but $1 million every year, or, you know, $2 million every year for 50 years is a bit more bite-sized. Is that like, that's a feasible approach, isn't it?
Yeah, well, this is the challenge here, comes in sort of, how to sequence your costs, spread them across not only, you know, short-term different ratepayers, but also potentially generations, right? And this is, you know, Jane could speak to this, but this is, you know, part of the rationale behind the Climate Resilience Fund that went up through the long-term plan. But yeah, like an alternative option opposed to wanting to get in there and chuck in a new big raised road would be sort of more, you know, incremental work, but it's generally more efficient to do things well and do them early. But yeah, challenging, definitely.
Yeah, I just had a couple of things to that. One is that we have a principle around sustainability that is around that investment being in a more thoughtful way than, I guess, just sort of trying to add band-aids throughout time.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I just have completely lost my train of thought. No, the costings. Yes, I just wanted to reinforce something which Tom mentioned earlier, which is that the costings are the ones that you saw before for replacement value for a lifetime. We're going through a process of refining those down. So when you see the final draft plan, the costings will look a lot less daunting than they do at the moment as well. So that's just something to be aware of.
Thank you. Can I just ask just a bit of a random question just on the back of that? Like, so let's just say, like, we accept that, you know, like, eventually the road between, you know, Teddington Strait will be lost underwater, let's say, like, in 40 or 50 years. How does that impact the way that we plan out, you know, like, residential land around in that neck of the woods in the future? Like, I mean, is it responsible to keep, like, allowing for you know, residential development in a place that might become, well, far less accessible over time? Or is that's not really a question for this panel, for the panel?
It's a really good question. It is a really good question, and it's the sort of question that this work does, I guess, lead us to all thinking about. Tom has mentioned some of the alternative options with marine infrastructure as a longer term solution. But I think increasingly there will be discussions about the appropriateness of building in at-risk areas generally across the district, and that will include where communities are becoming isolated. They themselves might not be at risk, but access to those communities is going to be at risk. And I think we're all sort of looking to government departments to kind of lead some of the thinking around that. You might have noticed that some of the rebuilds or the rebuilds that occurred after Cyclone Gabrielle were generally back to the same locations where roads were at risk. And I think some of the questions you're asking here again come up, you know, is it worth rebuilding these roads again and again over time? And are those communities at the end of those roads, you know, ultimately long term, are they viable? Are there other ways we can access them and still manage to retain those linkages?
Yeah, because otherwise we set ourselves up for ruinously expensive compensation scenarios like in the future. But anyway, look, that's a bigger conversation than here. But no, I appreciate your comments on that. Thank you.
Is it you next?
Yes,
Good.
yes.
And then the one.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen and Tom, for your presentation. I've got two questions. In terms of the development of the adaptation plan, the first thing it's going to impact is the infrastructure, and which is costly, as you iterated. And given the frequency and the intensity of flood events that we have seen in the country, have you looked into that, how it will impact the isolated communities and their valuation going forward? Because putting this much information out there is going to trigger some responses from EQC and insurance companies, and how those communities will be, their access will be vulnerable, meaning that insurance costs will go up. And going forward, is there any planning at the council or part, you know, based on this adaptation recommendation, any includes buying of those properties if something inevitable happens, so that people don't develop again in those areas? And we have seen up in Auckland, a number of people, they rebuilt their homes and they were flooded again, and we have got a few examples here on the peninsula as well. So how those decisions that communities make become part of this plan, so that the council and communities are working together to mitigate that impact?
Should have been at last conference. Did a good presentation from Australia on that.
Yeah, again, some pretty meaty questions there. Thank you. I'll just go through the sort of three components I want to pull out of that. One is around insurance, one is around compensation for private property owners, and the other is people building in these areas. So in terms of insurance, you know, the insurance industry's global reinsurers call the shots. We are a very small cog in this machine, but we have met and talked to the Insurance Council, and we have a fact sheet that we developed with the Insurance Council. And essentially, we know we can't control insurers' decisions. They have their own data anyway that they're using to make price-related decisions on. You will have seen a move towards risk-based pricing happening across all insurers. So if you are living in, for example, a floodplain, you're going to be paying more probably than somebody who's not, and that's, you know, kind of a reality of the world. But what the insurers have said is that, you know, over time, as they see councils acting to mitigate the risk, or communities acting to mitigate the risk, they do take that information into account. In terms of compensation for private property owners, there's been a bit of a frustrating wait for us really to see what central government intends to do. The previous government had some legislation coming based around a proposal from the expert working group, which was to essentially, through the RM reform, set up a compensation approach, or some legislation that would manage retreat, but would also introduce compensation. The new government has essentially referred this issue back to an inquiry, a select committee inquiry, which was open and which council submitted on earlier this year, which was a little bit more high level. And so we're sort of waiting to see what's going to come out of that in terms of offers that central government might make to at-risk private property owners. However, I think the precedent that was set after Cyclone Gabrielle is probably quite important to note, where councils were, it was a 50-50 split between councils and government as to that compensation being paid out. So we're waiting to see really what will come out of the legislation that's likely to be introduced. Well, this government is suggesting they will still introduce legislation next year around that. So we're waiting to see what would come out of that legislation. And then your point about people rebuilding in at-risk areas, there is a plan change, coastal hazards plan change, that is still being progressed through council, that will start to restrict development in at-risk areas once that has been through the notification process. I guess the only other thing to say is that we really acknowledge how hard it is for private property owners. You might recall that, I think it was midway through last year, we wrote to each of the private property owners in Littleton Harbour. There were about 110 whose properties were at risk with 20 centimetres of sea level rise, and we provided them with a bit of a summary about the risk to their property with pictures and maps showing the risk of different hazards, and provided them with some information about where to go and look for further advice.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Just a second question. Your recommendations, they are going to potentially influence the operational and capital investment of the council in those regions. One being, you mentioned that the road, keep the lifeline roads open and reduce the services into others. Are you working closely in relation with other departments at the council so that you are all work on the same page? Because you may be planning for 100 years and giving your recommendations, and while there are other capital investments already going ahead, do they talk to each other?
Yeah, we have a specialist and technical advisory group, the STAG, which advises the coastal panel, and on that STAG are representatives from each of the different asset classes. But there were some people who, so yes, we do talk to other parts of council that are involved in managing assets in this area, and there have been some particular asset owners, I guess, that we have engaged with very extensively, people like, who you'll be very familiar with, people like Paul Devlin, and Matt Pratt around Allendale Hall. So we are very much connected with those other parts of council. Tom might want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think probably the only thing I would elaborate on is that we plan a lot longer out than most of these other asset owners. So when some of the interventions are relatively proximate, like, for example, possible works around Marine Drive or Pā Road, for example, in Kokorarata, then we've been more actively engaging with, for example, people like Andrew Bullock and our road maintenance team about the money that they might have set aside and whether it aligns with the preferred pathways established by the panel. But then there are other instances where we're talking about this, big crazy thing that could happen in Teddington in, half a century away. And we want them to obviously have oversight and understanding of this possible future that we might arrive at, that the panel have recommended towards. But ultimately, there's not a whole lot of value add in us having sort of real detailed discussion, because there's still a lot of work to be had in the future around. We haven't designed these options, for example, so there's a lot of work to be done through implementation. But yeah, we're absolutely speaking with them, but the depth that we're going at does depend on sort of how proximate the options might be. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Jane, Tom, thanks for that. As part of your transport strategy, I think you're looking at marine structures in that. How are they placed on your priority kind of list, or in terms of funding and options for some of the smaller communities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I can say with this one is that there's marine infrastructure in the Rāpaki, Charters Bay, Puro and Kokorarata within like the context of our work, and 3 of those 4 have been recommended by the panel to retain long term, so to retain those assets over the next 100 years. It's only the Charters Bay boat ramp that's been recommended towards a sort of mid-term closure. So that's around a sort of 40, 50-year time frame is our sort of real rough estimate. So yeah, I would say they are pretty high priority because they're not assets that have been recommended on sort of bulk to be towards a removal, and they've been sort of flagged as not only possible useful connections in terms of transport, but also sort of key lifeline links as well. And both Kokorarata and Ngāti Wheki have been very active in sort of pushing for that as an important benefit as well. And when we ran a sort of exercise with the panel around priority, those assets came up quite high as well. Yeah, so they're certainly important.
Well, it looks like we have all of our questions answered for today. It is. Oh, Lana, she's just put her hand up.
Sorry, it's not so much a question. I just want to mihi to Jane and Tom and the rest of the panel and acknowledge the robust engagement that you've had with the communities. It's also, you know, for me, it's been really helpful to think about those other things, physical structures, Allendale Hall, potential risks, Governor's Bay, the Allendale landfill, that will have potentially quite significant impacts on our harbour. Also things like insurance rates increases, and I think it's really incumbent on the council to give a lot of thought to mitigate any potential in terms of planning, you know, development of this area. So I just want to thank you, and thank you for the amazing kai that you always put on as well. Haven't been to any hui where anything like that has been given, so thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Luana.
Cool. Cheers, team.
It's fantastic to have this update too. We look forward to hearing all about it whenever we can because it's such an important thing for our community. And just to keep that in mind as well as we're going day to day about our activities and what that could mean. I love how your community objective on ensure that infrastructure such as roads, jetties are sufficiently resilient to support health, safety and wellbeing of communities now and in the future. And just actually all the work that you guys are doing is like great, fantastic. And I'm looking forward to being helpful wherever we can.
Thanks very much. Yeah. Please send feedback through when we share a copy of the draft with you. We'd be really keen to hear anything. In particular, any connections we might not have made with you know, work or other issues across the harbour that you'll be aware of that we may not have picked up on. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate your time.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Right. Let's. Yes. We'll just close with karakia. Una here. Kia wātia, kia mama, te nana. Te tinana, te wairua, te arataka. Oiara, ironu, whapiria, ki runga. Te tina, uie, tai kie.
Thanks, team.
Thanks. Good to see you, Tyrone. Oh, Tyrone.